everybody, it's Romania Black, and guess what? We're starting Volume 2! Volume 2 of Thousand Autumns! And I really like this cover, maybe even more than the other one. So, they just get better. This cover is really great. We're going to talk about it when we get a nice close-up of it on the screen here, but I'm pretty excited. I have mapped out the chapters that we're going to be doing. Volume 1 is done, and now we're moving down into my little notepad with Volume 2. And so, Volume 1, we had 6 parts. I have separated Volume 7 or Volume 2 into 7 parts because 6, 7, I can't escape it. It's done. I'm cooked. So yeah, we're splitting it into 7 parts because there was one chapter set that was really, really long towards the end that I was like, I can't read more than 50 pages. Can't do it. Can't read it in one sitting. It's too much for my vocal cords. So we're splitting up a little bit. There's still pretty big chunks. I think there's only a couple where it's a little bit shorter than usual, but we're going to correspond them. I think at the very end of the novel, I'm splitting it a little bit differently, and then I'll just be able to watch the 12th episode of the audio drama when I get to the end of the book there. But yeah, so we're going to be looking at today chapters 32 through 35. So 32, 33, 34, 35. So 4 chapters today. Looks to be about 40 pages. I'm down with that. And then we got episode 7 of the audio drama that I'm going to listen to off screen and talk about that with you all. So I'm pretty excited. I got a glass of tea, a cup of tea here because I feel like that would be the best for my voice. But the only comment I want to talk about is from Rast, who clarified that the only branch that technically uses sex magic, we talked about that last week at the end of Volume 1, the only branch that technically uses sex magic is the Heihuan sect, which is the one with Juju and Song Jijing. So they're the only ones that use it, and Rast said that they're pretty sure it's frowned upon by the other 2 demonic branches. So here I am, trying to be kinky with it all and not kink shame our daddy Yan Wuxi, and he's not even the one that's using it, so... But anyway, I am super excited to dive into this novel, to Volume 2. And before we get to that, though, I do want to give a shout out because we have a lot of new patrons on the philanthropy tier over on Patreon. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I have a Patreon. You can go check it out if you want to. For $5 a month, you can see everything a week ahead of time. You can vote in the polls. You can join the Discord and talk about Thousand Autumns, whatever you want to do. But you can go check that out there. But if you cannot support me over on Patreon, please like the video and subscribe so you can see this every month. A lot of people commenting are not subscribers, and I'm like, you're commenting every week, but you haven't subscribed to the channel, and maybe they just don't know that they haven't subscribed. So if you haven't, please give me a subscribe and help me get closer to my next sub goal. And then also, I want to give a shout out to our philanthropy tier members over on Patreon because they donate on top of the $5 a month, usually a couple extra dollars, and it's really appreciated, and they're just super nice for doing that. So I give them a shout out in my videos. So Alexander Q, Aqua 2000, Amorphosilica, Alex Cornejo, Be Happy, our moderator, as well as Destiny Marie, Dana, Diana Williams, Daniel Ichu, Devorin, Damage 3245, Eric Fisho, Frank Acevedo, as well as James, Ghostly Turnip, Jessica Cullen, Jason N, Lyndon, Elfreya, Murphy, Nicholas, Mia Himagopher, I think I spelled that right, I think pronounced it right, Jack Witt, Poppy, Rose Jennison, Rast, Sugamom, Sunspots, Shimoyama, Translucent Men, Violet Stardust, Zero Anti-Zero, Zakiel, and Yannin. Thank you all so much for all of your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. Thank you. So yeah, that's where we're at. I'm ready to get this party started, y'all. I have been ready all day to read Thousand Autumns. I was going to watch something else tonight, but then I was like, I really want to get into Volume 2. So let's not waste any more time, shall we? We are going to be starting Volume 2 of Thousand Autumns, and we're going to get that party started here in 3, 2, 1, and let's dive in. I love this cover so much, not only for the cherry blossoms and all that it symbolizes, but Yan Wuxi looks really freaking good on this cover. At first when we started the novel and they talked about him being in like blue robes, I'm so used to him being in the purple and the donghua that I was like, I don't know, the purple looks so good on him. But then I saw this volume cover and he looks amazing in the blue, like that deep, deep, dark midnight blue. Oh, and the way that he has like the white of his hair, like the salt and pepper of his hair there. Daddy indeed. Daddy Yanwushi indeed. And I kind of love it because him and Shen Qiao are like both in like variances of blue. So it's like they're connected, but not like exactly the same. So I really dig that. Also, shout out to Reiki. Shout out to Reiki for getting me the table of contents and for me not being able to see what the chapters are called. So shout out to Reiki for that one, for getting me the digital version. And shout out to Be Happy for getting me the physical copy that I can follow along with as well. But yeah, we're going to be looking at chapters 32 through 35 and getting into this. So, I'm so excited. Like, that's a great spread. I can make that my background, honestly. I might actually do that. And then, I'm so excited. Also, I like the little purple tinges in their hair, but this feels like a tease. This feels like a tease. I'm so excited to see it. I'm like, come on, boys. He looks very, very daddy-esque there. Just saying. All right. So here we go, y'all. Get down to the brass tacks. Look at that. Look at that table of contents X'd out. Good job, Ricky. No need to see there. Nothing to see here. Chapter 32, The Sword Intent. So we are at, just to preface, we are at the banquet. Duan has showed up and has zeroed in on Shen Qiao, so we're going to see where that goes. Facing the astonished gazes of the crowd, Shen Qiao remained utterly calm. This Shen is no longer the sect leader. I fear I must disappoint you, Duan Jiang. Of course, Duan Wenyang knew who Shen Qiao was. Duan Wenyang was the one who'd sent the message challenging Shen Qiao to duel Kunye. And they did make this apparent in the Donghua, I believe. Duan Wenyang was Kunye's Shizhong, but his social status among the Gok Turks was lower than Kunye's because of his Han blood. That was why Kunye had represented Hu Lugu in the duel, and Duan Wenyang had not. It's getting awfully, feeling a little segregation there. Duan Wenyang laughed. Sect leader Shen is truly an outstanding hermit, one who does his seclusion in the cities. Given your moral prestige, I fear even the people of Chunyang Monastery would have to defer to you if they knew your identity. Why the need to attend this party under the pretext of sect leader Yan's name? Unless the rumors around the Jianghu are true. They say you have a deep relationship with sect leader Yan and are always together. No one had expected this. They'd come to celebrate a birthday, but were treated to 2 full-blown back-to-back dramas instead. The room was abuzz. Every guest was watching Shen Qiao, indescribable amazement written on their faces. Even Puliuru Jian, sitting beside him, was stunned and turned to look at him. After Shen Qiao had fallen from the cliff, he was nowhere to be found, either alive or dead. Everyone guessed he might have felt guilty for Zhandu Mountain's sake, and was too ashamed to appear in public again, so he'd chosen to conceal his identity. Maybe he was even living in the mountains as a recluse. They absolutely had not expected him to reappear at a birthday banquet thrown by a noble family of northern Zhou. Li Qingyu scrutinized Shen Qiao carefully, and disappointment filled his heart. When Lin Qingyu had gone to Zhandu Mountain, he'd been regretful that he couldn't duel Shen Qiao. But now, looking at the man's frail, emaciated appearance, his regret grew even deeper. He no longer lamented that he'd lost a rival, though. He lamented that this rival was unworthy of his rivalry. Well, now, Li Qingyu, let's not get hasty. Zhizhong did the same thing. Let's not get hasty. Shen Qiao remained silent, not answering any of Duan Wenyang's questions. Well, now, Shen Qiao, if you don't deny it, people are going to start thinking that you are. Madame Qin sighed and removed her ring, passing it to her son. This originally belonged to Hu Lugu, and times have changed. The object is still here, but the person is no longer. It should be returned to its original owner. Take it. She'd come from a prestigious family, yet had gone all the way to the Gok Turks to find a master. And she'd formed a deep connection with Hu Lugu. For as long as they could remember, Su Wei and Su Qiao had always thought that their mother was an ordinary noble lady who shared a close and loving relationship with their father. Now, as they heard the complicated emotions in their mother's voice, it dawned on them that her relationship with Hu Lugu went beyond that of a normal master and disciple. Oh, damn, bitch! Ooh, Madam Qin! Madam Qin was getting... She liked Hu Lugu. Interesting. And Hugh Lugu himself was even stranger. He'd lost his keepsake, but instead of coming to retrieve it, he'd loitered for more than 30 years. Only now, when, with Duan Weiyang's appearance, had these past affairs finally been revealed to the public. Maybe he gave it to her as a keepsake? Like, you know, like a class ring given to like a high school sweetheart? Su Qiao was racked with anxiety, but he couldn't press the issue, given where they were at the moment. He could only take the ring and hand it to a subordinate who passed it on to Duan Wenyang. Once he'd received the ring, Duan Wenyang performed the Gokturk salute. This one is deeply grateful for Madame Chen's understanding and principles. With this keepsake, I can settle things for my master. How did Hugh Lugu pass away? Asked Madame Chen. Duan Wenyang sighed. In his search for the union of man and heaven, my master secluded himself, seeking a breakthrough. He ordered us not to enter or disturb him for 3 years. The moment that time was up, we went in to check on him. Unexpectedly, we discovered his esteemed self had already passed away while sitting in meditation. That seems rather suspicious. Like, already passed away in meditation? So, just died in his sleep? The more elderly people present at the banquet still remembered Hugh Lugu's ambitious sweep of the Central Plains experts long ago, before Chief Fungay had finally stopped him. He was a grandmaster of his generation, yet in the end, he too had been carried away on the wind. From now on, no matter what storms surged within the Jianghu, they'd have no connections to Hugh Lugu or Chief Fungay. The talented and the gifted scattered in the winds, leaving sighs and lamentations in their wake. Ooh, I like that line. That's good. Madame Chen was silent. None could say what she was thinking. She's probably thinking it's bullshit, because in the Donghua, he's still alive. So unless that's Donghua only, we'll see. But I feel like she's thinking that something's up with that. Su Wei and Su Qiao still hated that Duan Wenyang had ruined their mother's birthday banquet, and they no longer bothered with niceties. Since you have the ring, we ask your distinguished self to leave the Su residence at once. Don't be in a rush and to drive me away, sirs, said Duan Wenyang. I came to you to ask you for someone. Su Qiao, thinking he was going to pull something else on his mother, said coldly, we don't have anyone you want here. Duan Wenyang laughed. Su Erlang has never heard the question before refusing. Relax, I mean no harm to Madame Chen. Now that the ring's been returned, my master's wish has been fulfilled, so of course I won't trouble her any further. Taskbar Kagon commanded me to look for someone, and that is whom I'm seeking. Su Wei said, then you should say so to His Majesty. The Su residence is but a small temple. It cannot accommodate a great Buddha like you. Guards, escort him out. Wait, said Duan Wenyang. Does the Duke of Meiyang County have a younger sister who married Yang Zhang? We have enmity with this man. The Kagon orders that I bring him and his entire family back to the Khaganate to be dealt with if there is to be any alliance between us and the Zhou. And so, I ask the Duke of Meiyang County to please hand them over. Su Wei's expression fell. In fact, the family Duan Wenyang spoke of was his cousin's. His cousin's husband, Yan Zhang, had offended the Gokturks, and the family was deathly afraid that they would use the alliance to ask for them. They had fled to Su Wei's house, and Su Wei had secretly taken them in. But he hadn't expected Duan Wenyang would discover this news and would come knocking on his door, relentlessly in pursuit. I know not where they've gone, said Su Wei. If you're looking for someone, go seek them out yourself. It has nothing to do with the Su residence. I asked the Duke of Meiyang County to please not make things so difficult for me, said Duan Wenyang. I came to your house to ask you for them out of consideration for the deep connection between Madame Chen and my master. Otherwise, I would have reported this matter directly to your majesty and waited for the Lord of Zhou's decree, but I fear I would embarrass your esteemed residence. Su Qiao was furious. You specifically chose the day of my mother's birthday? My mother's birthday? To swagger about? First you asked for the ring and we gave it to you. Now we've given you an inch, you're taking a mile? Do you think the Su family is afraid of you? If we say they're not here, so get out. Everyone attending this birthday party is like popcorn time. Duan Wenyang too lost his smile. He narrowed his eyes at Su Qiao and said slowly, I heard that Su Erlang is a disciple of Chunyang Monastery, so your skills must be extraordinary. Since we happen to meet today, I would like to ask you for some pointers." Su Qiao sneered. Well, well, the fox's tail is finally exposed. You clearly came to cause a scene. Yet you've put on such an innocent act. You came to us yourself, so don't go crying and tattling to your gawk Turk Kagan if you leave here dead or disabled. And as he spoke, he lunged at Duan Wenyang. So basically in the Donghua, we kind of skipped the whole cousin plot line, and the fight was over the ring. If I'm remembering correctly. His lunge wasn't without form or method. Rather, it complemented his sword techniques. His body flowed as he willed it, the movements bold and beautiful. Right away, someone shouted, "Spectacular! I like that this drama has been going on with this family, and the audience has been munching on popcorn, and now they're fighting. They're like, okay, go get him! The chair! Give him the chair!" Faced with Su Qiao's swordplay as brilliant as snow, Duan Wenyang remained completely composed. He didn't back up, only waited until Su Qiao's sword glare had swept in great swaths until it was directly in front of him, and then he reached right into it empty-handed. When his hand touched the shining blade, it wasn't ground into pieces by the sword glare. He held it, dead in place. Everyone stared at the sight of them. Duan Wenyang's right hand firmly clamped onto the blade as he gently rotated his wrist. It didn't look like he used much strength, but the blade bounced and whined. Su Qiao's sword nearly flew from his hand. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. His martial arts didn't compare to his Shidi Ling Qingyou's, but he still ascended into the ranks of the first rate. Never before had he experienced a situation where he stood on the precipice of defeat almost as soon as a fight had began. Could it be his opponent was Hu Lugu's disciple, and was so on a different level entirely? Su Qiao refused to accept this. He rapidly changed tactics. Without staying still for even a moment, he withdrew his hand and backed up several steps, and then made a sharp turn with the help of a pillar. He lobbed a sword glare and combined with true chi at Duan Wenyang's face while gathering power in his other palm and then striking at him with that as well. "It's too cramped in here," said Duan Wenyang. "It's hampering the fun of the fight." Duan didn't take the attack straight on. Instead, he laughed brightly and turned around, leaping for an exit to get outside. Su Qiao was in hot pursuit, and the two of them fought from within the house to without. In a split second, sword glares were firing everywhere, while forebodingly a cold air roiled around them. Naturally, the guests went outside to watch. I like that everybody just got their lawn chairs. They just did like the meme where they sit the chair outside and they're like, all right, let's go see this thing go down. What a birthday party. What a birthday party. One man's sword glare was as harsh as the surging rapids, swallowing everything as they rushed forward, while the other man remained barehanded, wandering within the sword glares. It seemed that Duan Wenyang constantly teetered on the edge of disaster, his situation as precarious as a house of cards. Yet time and time again, he pulled through by the skin of his teeth. It was a breathtaking sight for the guests. Some, like Princess Qingdu, knew no martial arts and were unwilling to watch the bloodshed. They chose to remain in the house with Madame Chen, who hadn't left either. The laymen were watching for the excitement, while the professionals were watching for reference. The spectators whose martial arts were beyond a certain level realized that even though Duan Wenyang looked like he was treading on thin ice, in reality he held the upper hand. Puliuru Jian made a sound of surprise, and then whispered to Shen Qiao, "From how I see it, Su'er Long is being toyed with." Shen Qiao nodded. "I feel the same." Hearing him say that, Jian couldn't help but ask curiously, "Shen Jiang, can you see?" Yeah, I've been like, this is one of those moments like, well, I may not be able to see, but I can hear. How can you hear what's happening? The swing of a sword, their true chi, footsteps, even breathing. These all have sound. If you're blind, your ears will become even sharper. Duan Wenyang wants to observe Chunyang Monastery's martial arts, so he isn't rushing to decide the battle. It's a pity that Su Qiao hasn't realized it. He's under Duan Wenyang's sway now. It definitely couldn't be only Shen Qiao and Jian who'd realized what was happening. But since there wasn't yet a clear winner to the battle, if anyone rashly intervened, first it'd affect the fairness of the match, which was disgraceful, and secondly, it would look like they were patronizing Su Qiao. Hence, even his Shidi Li Qingyu could do nothing but wait quietly for the conclusion to arrive. When Puliuru Jian heard Shen Qiao's answer, he said thoughtlessly, "Well, since Kunye and Duan Wenyang are both Hu Lugu's disciples, who's the stronger one?" Only once the words were out did he realize that they were somewhat inappropriate. He quickly apologized. "I didn't mean to bring up Shen Jiang's painful memories." Shen Qiao laughed. "It's fine. Though Kunye is strong, the harsh arrogance of his martial arts means they're not as carefree and untrammeled as Duan Wenyang's. In my opinion, I believe that Duan Wenyang is closer to capturing the heart of his master's martial arts, and so he's a couple notches above Kunye. That's what we kind of suspected in the Dongwa, right? Puliuru Zhang grew serious. If that's true, then I fear this man didn't only come to the Su residence today to ask for the keepsake or the family of Su Longjun's cousin, but to also make a name for himself. Shen Qiao nodded. I was thinking the same. Those with experience in the Zhangyu made up more than half of the birthday banquet's guests on account of Xu Chou's presence. Among these, many were experts from the younger generation like Li Qingyu, and they could likely compete for a spot in the top 10 rankings. If Duan Wenyang defeated them, that would mean that he was stronger, and the effect would reverberate throughout the Zhangyu, just like the duel between Kunye and Shen Qiao. The Gokturks' advance was gradual but prudent, allying with the Northern Zhou through marriage while remaining ambiguous in their dealings with the Northern Qi. They assisted Northern Zhou in fighting Northern Qi with one hand while sheltering Northern Qi nobles and officials who sought refuge with the other. One might think they were hesitant and undecided, swaying from side to side because of their great strength. Neither Northern Zhou nor Qi dared to unduly offend them, and the wolf had never concealed its ambitions. Now a new generation of Gokturk experts had arrived in the Central Plains, one after another, almost as if they wanted to complete Hulugu's old grandiose, unfulfilled desire for absolute dominance. First, Kunye had challenged Shen Qiao, crushing Zhandu Mountain underfoot and catapulting himself into the limelight with a single match. And today, another had come to the Su residence and challenged everyone. If not for how Kunye had suffered a loss at Yang Wushi's hands, the Gokturks' arrogance would have surely swelled even larger. As they spoke, they heard Duan Wenyang boom with laughter, and the dazzling sword glare stopped in an instant. From where they'd been, there came Su Chao's muffled groan. Before anyone could see how Duan Wenyang made his move, Su Qiao had already fallen off the roof. Ere long, Su Wei hurried forward and pulled him up. Are you all right? Su Qiao shook his head. His face was wretched in pain, yet he bore it without making a sound. Duan Wenyang leapt down from the roof too, his demeanor incredibly casual. No one there held any fondness for him, and they were forced to acknowledge his strength. Duan Wenyang, you're taking this too far, said Su Wei angrily. Do you really think you can just walk all over us? Duan Wenyang smiled derisively. That's incorrect, County Duke. Your brother started it. How can you blame me? If you're willing to hand over your Wanjiang's family, I'll leave immediately and bother you no further. Well, you've pushed and pushed, and we've made concession after concession. Yet you take us as soft persimmons that you can walk all over. Since that's the case, let's just see how much Hugh Lugu passed down to you. Madame Chen rocked out. She was already in her 50s, but perhaps because she'd practiced internal cultivation, her age didn't show. Instead, she carried the air of mature charm and the appearance of a beautiful woman in middle age. Well, would we not say that 50s are middle-aged? Would we not say that? Ageist! Duan Wenyang said regretfully, while we're on the topic, I should be calling the Madame Shiji. It's only a pity that the late master expelled you after you escaped the Kaghanate with his ring. I've heard that Shizun valued you greatly back then, and used to even want you to be his successor. But Madame Chen, you used your beauty to seduce him, then stole his ring and fled. Recalling it now, don't you feel any guilt? Silence! The Su brothers were enraged to hear them insult their mother. But Madame Chen just sneered. As a junior, the likes of you have no place to speak on the matters that are between me and Hugh Lugu. Did the Gokturks suffer such a drought of people that Hugh Lugu could only accept a smack talker like you as a disciple? I feel like Duan is maybe a little jealous of her and maybe does not understand that their relationship was a bit more than just master and disciple. Perhaps, she said to Su Wei, Da Long, bring me Erlong's sword. Before Su Wei could make a move, someone said, Madame Chen need not lower herself to bother with a Gokturk barbarian. You don't have to trouble yourself so. This man fought a disciple of Chunyang Monastery, so naturally it falls to the members of Chunyang Monastery to finish it. The one who spoke was Li Qingyu. Both his expression and tone were flat, without a shred of killing intent. But it was exactly that even tone that made Duan Wenyang turn serious. He scrutinized Li Qingyu closely for a while and then said, You must be Li Yongji, the other member of the Twin Jades of Qingcheng. From what I saw, your Xizhong isn't even a match for one of your fingers. Yet he shares your title. What an injustice that is for you. Li Qingyu ignored his provocations and drew his sword, its blade tip pointed downwards. His wrist appeared relaxed, yet also slightly raised. His entire body radiated a sense of languid nonchalance. He didn't seem any more serious than he had a moment ago. Duan Wenyang's expression became graver and sterner, and a horsewhip somehow appeared in his hand! It was dark and slender and made of some unknown material that lacked even the slightest hint of shine. Yet at the same time it seemed completely ordinary. Puliuru Jian did not know what to make of it. He couldn't resist but turn to Shen Qiao. Xinjiang, can you tell what's special about his whip? Shen Qiao shook his head. I can't see it very well. What kind of whip is it? Jian described it to him. Shen Qiao mulled it over. If my guess is right, that whip was made from soaking crocodile skins from the southern sea into a secret concoction of the Miao people. It's incredibly tough. Even the sharpest of weapons may fail to cut it. Ah, said Puliuru Jian. So it has a spectacular backstory indeed. It looks like Li Gongji has met his match this time. It wasn't only Jian. Everyone else had their necks stretched forward in anticipation. A fantastic battle was about to take place. It was nearly impossible to not be excited. Jian had just finished speaking when Li Qingyu moved. Compared to Su Qiao's, Li Qingyu's attack was like night and day. Su Qiao's movements were swift and harsh. He used his agility to achieve victory. Both his sword glares and chi were like a vast, inescapable net enveloping his enemy, giving them nowhere to escape and even striking a harsh psychological blow. His style was very effective against weaker opponents, but an expert like Duan Wenyang, whose internal cultivation was sturdy as a steel wall, could simply ignore Su Qiao's sword chi and smash right through to him. In contrast, Li Qingyu's movements were much slower, and his manner composed and unflustered. Others only saw him evenly thrust his sword forward before twirling the tip in a darting feint. The blade point wasn't even aimed at Duan Wenyang, but angled gently at the ground. His movements were almost indolent and languid, like a flower in slow bloom beneath the sun. I like beneath the sun instead of beneath the moon, that's what you would think. However, in Duan Wenyang's eyes, true chi poured from Li Qingyu's body and into the blade tip, with his twirling feint before surging from his sword to the ground. Wherever the chi struck, dark tiles were thrown into the air as cracks snaked the ground. The tile fragments swept up in the air currents shot straight at him. Before Duan Wenyang could make his next move, Li Qingyu was already in the air. Man and sword became one, and together they melded into a beam of white light that pierced right through the protective true chi around Duan Wenyang as if it were empty air. Blazing sparks leapt in blues and violets like surging summer lightning. From slow to fast, calm to urgent, all these changes happened in an instant. If someone's attention had drifted even slightly, they'd have no time to understand what they were seeing. Duan Wenyang snapped his whip forward, striking both person and sword with perfect timing. The two blasts of true chi slammed into each other like an encounter before two kings. They rolled into each other with tremendous force, enough to overturn seas. In the end, either Duan Wenyang's whip would grind Li Qingyu's sword into pieces, or Li Qingyu's sword chi would destroy the whip. The result was completely unexpected, for Duan Wenyang's whip actually missed. Everyone had witnessed Li Qingyu's figure already beneath the whip's silhouette, yet somehow it failed to swallow him. Instead, he simply vanished and then suddenly reappeared to Duan Wenyang's left, right, and then from behind. Every single Li Qingyu was performing the same action, thrusting the blade point evenly forward. At this moment, Shen Qiao and company heard someone's low shout from the side, "Sword intent! Li Qingyu has managed to achieve sword intent!" Okay! That whole chapter was just family drama and a fight. Who knew we were going to start this volume off like an episode of General Hospital? There were 4 echelons, chapter 33, an unexpected development. There were 4 echelons of the sword. Sword chi, sword intent, sword heart, and sword spirit. When laymen saw the sword chi of its wielder running rampant, the chi controlling the sword itself, they'd think the person's swordplay was extraordinary. But in truth, this was only the first level when it came to entering the echelons of the sword. Of course, not everyone could achieve even the first echelon of sword chi. Some people spent their entire lives trying and still failed to pass through that gate, unable to glimpse the way in. And even more people relied on fixed moves to prevail over their enemies. It had only been through Yan Wushi's relentless pressure, forcing Shen Qiao to hover on death's doorstep, that Shen Qiao himself was able to fight his way past certain doom and gain insight into sword intent. And yet, Li Qingyu had managed to achieve the echelon of sword intent at such a young age. The immensity of his martial aptitude was evident. But as he'd just broken through to sword intent mere moments ago, he was still unfamiliar with it. Perhaps if he'd broken through back on Jiandu Mountain, he wouldn't have lost to UI by half a move. All in all, the moment the words sword intent were uttered, everyone looked at Li Qingyu with new eyes. Yi Pishin was already one of the world's top 10 cultivators, and now there was Li Qingyu too. It looked like Chungyang's monastery rise was already unstoppable. Duan Wenyang didn't resign himself to defeat, even though he couldn't immediately determine which of the after images was the true Li Qingyu. He didn't choose to sort them out. Instead, he chose to snap his whip at the ground and use the resulting force to leap high into the air toward a tree branch overhead. His whip lashed around a branch as he sprang right off it. With the tip of his foot, and he swooped down towards Li Qingyu. The dense shroud of black shadows left by his cracking whip enveloped the after images entirely. Before he reached Li Qingyu, his true chi and the mass of whip shadows swallowed everything. Regardless of which after image was the true one, Li Qingyu had to forcibly break through the bulwark Duan Wenyang had constructed in order to return to the offensive. Duan Wenyang's true chi and internal cultivation were exactly the same as the impression he left on others. Willful and carefree, but strong and imperious as well. It seemed to be everywhere at once, yet it was also like a precipice of sheer ice, immovably solid, or an antelope suspended high in midair, leaving no tracks to be found. There was nowhere it couldn't enter, and no method that could guard against it. His true chi ripped the courtyard leaves from their branches, drawing them into a vortex that swirled around 2 fingers, engulfing them entirely and leaving the rest unable to see how the battle progressed. It was impossible to tell what kind of emotions these two had now, but the observers were already incredibly anxious. The members of Chungyang Monastery knew Li Qingyu was not an easy mark, but they still feared that something unforeseen might happen. Especially Shen Qiao. He had fought Duan Wenyang himself, so no one could understand Duan Wenyang's power more than him. Whether his Shidi could win this battle or not was still uncertain. If Duan Wenyang defeated Li Qingyu, it was unlikely that anyone else present could match him. If that happened, then whether or not Duan Wenyang could take away Sui's cousin and her husband wasn't the main problem. Once the news got out, the Gok Turks' prestige would grow further, and the Central Plains' morale would diminish. This, too, was probably why Duan Wenyang chose to launch an attack today. Just as Sui's thoughts were spiraling, the leaves whirling around the two combatants froze, and then drifted to the ground one after another. The two of them stood face to face. Li Qingyu was still where he had been, but the sword that had been in his hand lay a distance away, while Duan Wenyang's whip was still firmly grasped in his hand. There was nothing strange in their complexions, and no visible hint of injuries on either. Li Qingyu's expression was blank, and Duan Wenyang looked the same as before. Seeing this, the crowd was a bit confused. Then, Duan Wenyang let out a boisterous laugh and spoke first. Li Gongji's fame is indeed well-deserved. To achieve the echelon of sword intent at such a young age, your future achievements will surely be boundless. This Duan willingly admits defeat. Li Qingyu said slowly, my skill is inferior. There's nothing I can say. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. They looked at Duan Wenyang, then looked back at Li Qingyu. One had admitted defeat, while the other one said his skill was inferior? Exactly who had won and who had lost? Duan Wenyang laughed. I came here for a family, and never thought I'd get the chance to spar with the most prestigious rising star of the day. This trip wasn't a waste. Zhijiang broke in. If Duanjiang still wishes to continue, the Linchuan Academy is willing to keep you occupied as well. Yeah! Duan Wenyang looked all around him and clasped his hand behind his back. And what can Linchuan Academy do? He said arrogantly. You can't defeat me. Let Ruyan Kehui himself come instead. I heard that many great heroes have gathered here. Linchuan Academy, Chunyang Monastery, the Liyue Guild, all illustrious martial sects and organizations of the Central Plains. Full of respect and admiration, I paid you an official visit, but it seems your fame is ill-deserved, and the rumors full of exaggeration. Of everyone here today, only Li Gongji is worthy of being my opponent. The rest of you are all merely mediocre. He paused before continuing. I almost forgot. There's also sect leader Shen. I like that he just stopped to recognize him. Your prowess might have been a little better than theirs, but that was only before you lost to my Shidi. The current Shen Qiao is just a toothless tiger. You people of the Central Plains had a saying, something like, even dogs can push around a tiger in the plains. You can't return to Zhandu Mountain with the state you're in, and you're forced to rely on Sect Leader Yan's protection. You're below even a stray dog. If I were you, I'd have killed myself out of shame a long time ago. How could I still have the face to live in this world? I like how Shen Qiao was sitting there minding his own business. Shen Qiao has nothing to do with Duan Wenyang's goals. Duan Wenyang came for a ring, and he came to get, like, these family members that are, like, owed a piece of revenge from his side from Hugh Lugu. Shen Qiao has nothing to do with him, and he's just like, oh, and by the way, this guy, like, what? Although there was a smile on his face, his expression as he looked at Shen Qiao was incomparably cold and indifferent. It was very obvious that in his eyes, Shen Qiao was no longer a potential opponent, but some insignificant passerby, or even trash. John felt that if he hadn't been the one to suffer this kind of public humiliation, he could have endured it. But Shen Qiao only stood there, meek and docile, head and lashes lowered. It was as if he'd heard nothing, or like he'd fallen asleep standing up. While this level of forbearance and restraint drew admiration, it also elicited contempt. Xi Jiang could remain indifferent to the mocking Duan Wenyang directed at Shen Qiao, but not to him all but calling Linshan Academy worthless. He couldn't pretend that he hadn't heard how Duan Wenyang had spoken as if only Chunyang Monastery was worthy enough to be his opponent, and everyone else was completely beneath him. He gave a derisive laugh about to erupt. Duan Wenyang, said Sue, you used our mother's birthday banquet as your personal training ground. You've made more than enough of a mess already. Since you came as a representative of the Empress, I must report what happened today to His Majesty, so he may deal with you. Now I ask that you leave this place immediately. Duan Wenyang laughed. I received Li Gongji's advice with his sword intent today. I'm satisfied. I was already planning to leave anyway, with or without the Duke of Meian County's orders. I look forward to meeting you again. Saying this, he turned to right around to leave, and Zhejiang couldn't take it any longer. Halt! Linchuan Academy's Zhejiang asked to receive Duan Zhejiang's guidance. Before he'd even finished speaking, his sword had left its sheath. His body transformed to a sweeping arc as he flew towards Duan Wenyang. But it seemed Duan Wenyang had predicted this move. Without even turning his head, he propelled himself upward with a tap of his foot and alit on the roof. Then he vanished completely, leaving only a long string of laughter behind him. I understand that Ji Longjun wishes to use me as to achieve fame, but please excuse me for not wanting to keep you company, he said. Let's leave it until after you achieve sword intent too. Ha ha ha! Without a target, Zhejiang could only sheath his sword and ground himself once more, glaring hatefully in the direction where Duan Wenyang had vanished. So he was just like, okay, bye, never mind, not gonna fight you, see ya. From the sidelines, a person called out in alarm, oh, Li Gongji, are you all right? Everyone hastily turned their heads towards the sound of the voice. Li Qingyu had pulled out a handkerchief and was already stained with a mouthful of bloody foam. He shook his head and said, I'm fine. I suffered some minor internal injuries. A couple days of recuperation will be enough. Only then did everyone else understand what he meant by my skill was inferior just then. But if someone like Li Qingyu, who'd achieved sword intent, wasn't his match, then how exactly terrifying was Duan Wenyang's martial prowess? Could he be the second coming of Hugh Lugu? With this on their minds, they looked helplessly at each other with horror. Zhejiang's heart fell too. He thought himself fairly talented. The opponents he encountered while traveling the Jianghu for years had given him an illusion, one that told him that even if he couldn't make the top 10 just yet, he wasn't far. But all of a sudden, these experts had popped up one after the other. First there was Li Qingyu, who'd already achieved sword intent. Then there was Duan Wenyang, who was even stronger than Qingyu. Once, Zhejiang had thought himself capable of anything in the Jianghu. They could conquer even its tumultuous tides, yet in that very Jianghu, the young replaced the old, and every mountain loomed higher than the previous. While Zhejiang grew dispirited, Li Qingyu approached Shen Qiao. Sect leader Yin. This Shen is no longer the sect leader, said Shen Qiao. Li Gongji need not to address me as such. He's like, will all of you listen to me? He's like, I'm not deaf, I'm just blind. Li Qingyu ignored him and continued, oh no! I've already achieved the echelon of sword intent, yet I'm still a bit inferior to Duan Wenyang. Does that mean his Shidi Kunye is even stronger than him? Shen Qiao shook his head. Though Kunye's martial prowess is notable, he is not on Duan Wenyang's level. Chi Fengge was the world's #1, And I greatly admired him for his martial prowess and magnificence, said Li Qingyu. And yet sect leader Shen, his direct successor, could not defeat Kunye. Wow, just everybody just rub it in Shen Qiao's face. Everyone just rub it in that this poisoned man is... What? Oh my god. Shen Qiao was silent. Li Qingyu released a quiet sigh. When you were born, I was not. When I were born, you were already old. Oh my god! I regret that I wasn't able to witness the glory of Qifeng's martial arts firsthand, when I still believed that Zhandu Mountain had worthy successors. It's a pity, such a pity. This guy's a bitch! Oh my god! What an arrogant little brat! Like, though his expression was mild as before when he spoke of pity, one could hear resoundingly sincere disappointment in his voice. Ah, Shen Qiao, tell him what's up! This was a man who completely dedicated himself to martial arts. He would never look down on untalented or those who failed to study beneath a good master. But as Li Qingyu saw it, Shen Qiao had both innate talent and a perfect environment far beyond others. Yet he'd still come to this. Not only did he look down on Shen Qiao, but he bore against him a faint anger born of disenchantment. Well, excuse me, princess! First, he'd taken Duan Yinyang's contempt, and now it was Li Qingyu's lamentations, not to mention the dubious stares of the crowd around him. Anyone with pride would be wearing an ugly expression by now, if they hadn't flown into a rage instead. They'd lacked the face to stick around. But Shen Qiao could endure what others could not. Or perhaps he wasn't enduring at all. He remained as stolid and unyielding as ever, his expression unchanged, and he even nodded his head in agreement with Li Qingyu. My master was indeed extraordinarily magnificent. Few people could compare. It's a pity Li Gongji wasn't able to meet his esteemed self at least once. Li Gongji's peerless talent would doubtless have reached my master's praise. Would doubtless have received my master's praise. In spite of everything, he could say such a thing. Even Puliru Jian could only admire Shen Qiao's self-restraint and the way he brushed aside the criticism leveled at him. It seemed that Li Qingyu didn't expect such a reaction from Shen Qiao either. You are a great man, so why must you dance with that demon and debase yourself? There we go. By demon, he of course meant Yang Wuxi. Shen Qiao had been a proper upright leader of a Taoist sect, and yet he'd fallen so far that he'd involved himself with a demon like Yang Wuxi. Of course, it looked like debasement to an outsider. But although these Yanghu's groups and organizations saw Yang Wuxi as the leader of a demonic sect, he was also the junior preceptor of the Crown Prince, personally appointed by the Emperor himself. Puliru Jian's brow wrinkled, and before Shen Qiao had said anything, he spoke up first. Li Gongji has incredible skill indeed, and Jian admires you greatly. However, the greater one's talents are, the more modest and open-minded one should be. Shen Langjun is in poor health, and he's never offended you. So why must this distinguished master act so aggressively? As someone from a prestigious sect, do you not find such conduct dishonorable? Get it, Jian? Li Qingyu shot Puliru Jian a glance and said nothing. He didn't make it to stay either, and instead turned away to leave. Sui stopped him. First he bowed, and then he said in a loud voice, "Today's banquet was ruined due to an uninvited guest, and this was our Su family's fault. I thank everyone for your courage in actively supporting and defending us. My brother is injured, so we must end the banquet prematurely. Wei apologizes to everyone for this and promises we'll resume another day. He asks for your forgiveness." No one could have predicted what happened that day. Naturally, no one blamed the hosts. Instead, they offered their consolations one after the other. Some of the nobles who were close family and friends even discussed it with him how to submit a memorial to the emperor for the impending complaint. Some guests took their leave, trickling out while one of Madame Chen's maids led Li Qingyu back to the residence for treatment and rest. Jian said to Shen Qiao, "Xinjiang, let's go as well." Shen Qiao nodded, but he hadn't yet gotten a word out when something else ensued. As I was leaving just now, something occurred to me. Since you're unwilling to hand over Yan Zhang and his wife, then I'll invite over the madame as a guest. Let me see who you value more, your mother or your cousin. It was a voice traveling in from afar. Its sound bright and incomparably clever, as if you were speaking right next to each listener's ear. Such a high level of sound displacement was even more difficult to pull off than the sound transmission technique. Su Wei and Su Chao's faces were distorted by fear. Sue was a scholar through and through, lacking even enough strength to trust a chicken, while Su Qiao had just suffered a harsh loss to Duan Wenyang. His right hand was still completely immobilized, but he couldn't spare a thought for it, and he leapt, throwing himself to where his mother was. But before he could even get close, he suddenly was tossed in the opposite direction, landing heavily on the ground. The others couldn't even see how he'd been injured. No one had expected Duan Wenyang to return so soon after he'd left. I was wondering, because I was like, in the Donghua, Shen Qiao fights Duan. In the Donghua, he does. So I was like, were we going to skip that? But nope. But of course, he'd never promised to drop his request for Yan Shizhong and his wife. He must have planned this long in advance and not retreated too far away in the first place. At this kind of critical moment, it could be a mere empty, useless talk to condemn them for resorting to such underhanded and shameless tactics. Regardless of whether it was the Jianghu or the court or even the shifting of powers of the world, it was a dog-eat-dog world. Might makes right. Whoever punched the hardest got the final say. So the moment Su Qiao was sent flying, Li Qingyu, Dou Yanshan, and Zhijiang took action as one, all trying to stop Duan Wenyang. These men were the cream of the crop of the Jianghu at present. If there was a gap between them in the top 10, it was a small one. Li Qingyu, for example, was likely already qualified to enter the top 10 ranks, even if he had been slightly inferior to Duan Wenyang during their duel just moments ago. But if all three of them attacked as a group, there was no reason they should fail. But they had miscalculated. Duan Wenyang didn't go for Madame Chen. Instead, switched targets halfway and went straight for Su Wei. Madame Chen had been near a disciple under Hu Lugu in her youth. Even if she hadn't fought for many years, her martial skills were likely quite sound. But Su Wei was different. The Duke of Meiyang County was naught but a scholar, and he didn't know a lick of martial arts. Duan Wenyang's movements were direct and agile, totally unhesitating. He must have been feinting earlier. This was his plan all along. The group was already half a step behind, and now with the flap of his sleeve, Duan Wenyang sent out a palm strike that impeded them for another moment. By the time they were ready to attack again, Duan's fingers were already touching Su Wei's neck. Even if they'd been godly immortals, there was no way they could rescue him in time. Su Qiao cried out helplessly in alarm, "Oh, Zhang! Madame Chen's complexion twisted as she snarled, "Don't touch my son!" And then suddenly, Duan Wenyang made a sound of surprise. It wasn't because of Su Qiao and Madame Chen's shouts. And it certainly wasn't because Li Qingyu and the others had somehow made it to him in time. A bamboo cane came out of nowhere, cutting him squarely off from the front. So he had time to fix that. Duan Wenyang instinctively reached out to push it aside, but somehow the cane slipped from his grasp time and again, as impossible to catch as a mudfish, leaving him no room to apply proper force. True chi spread from the cane's movements and overlapping ripples, and though it wasn't crushing, it was powerfully persistent. Duan Wenyang was forced to temporarily abandon Su Wei and devote his attention to this new, unexpected opponent. When he finally got a good look at who his opponent was, his shock showed starkly on his face, about to brim over. Oh, could it be? Could it be? Could it be? Oh, Chapter 34, Shen Qiao strikes 2, Electric Boogaloo! That's right, baby. Shen Qiao's eyes were still gently closed, his face tranquil like placid waters. To an observer, it would seem the bamboo cane in his hand moved completely arbitrarily, hitting wherever it wished with no pattern to speak of. But it was exactly the disorder in those attacks that made Duan Wenyang wary. With his expression even graver than when he'd faced Li Qingyu, he exchanged 100 blows with Shen Qiao in an instant. They'd fought from the ground to the rooftops, and then from the rooftops to the trees, the light and shadow dancing across their figures as they flitted about. At times restrained and at other times brutal. The speed at which they struck and parried was astounding. Anyone whose martial arts were even slightly lacking were unable to discern their moves. And so far, Shen Qiao showed no signs of falling behind. Now that Duan Wenyang was unable to pay attention to them, the Su family's servants hastily came up and surrounded Su Wei to protect him. Su Qiao bid them to take his mother and brother back to the house, while he himself remained standing outside despite the pain. The more everyone watched, the more astonished they became, and the more astonished was none other than Duan Wenyang. When Shen Qiao had failed to react to Duan and Li Qingyu's taunts, it came as no surprise to anyone. For Duan Wenyang wasn't the only one who thought that Shen Qiao's current state meant he was already half ruined. Fame could be rebuilt, but recovering his martial arts would be very difficult, and without it, he had no place in the Xionghu. If he was forced to rely on others for protection, then no matter how powerful that protector was, Shen Qiao was no better than trash in the eyes of Duan Wenyang and the rest. Anyone had the right to look down on him. And yet, it was this trash who accomplished what almost everybody else there had failed to do. He'd not only stopped Duan Wenyang, he'd even fought him to a draw. Just then, many of those watching couldn't help but think, in the end, the sect leader of Zhandu Mountain was the sect leader of Zhandu Mountain. The title of world's #1 Taoist sect was almost flattery, but Shen Qiao hadn't been chosen a Qi Fengge successor without reason. That being said, if he was on par with Duan Wenyang, how had he lost to the duel to Kunye and end up in such a state? Was there some hidden story within? Get that gossip flowing! As chaotic thoughts flashed through everyone's minds, they stared unswervingly at the duel before them, afraid to miss even a single second. The fight was just as marvelous as the match with Li Qingyu just before. However, inside the circle of battle, things weren't as effortless for Shen Qiao as the spectators believed. In truth, Duan Wenyang was indeed very strong, and his martial abilities were definitely above Kunye's. Both were irrefutable. There were a couple of reasons that Shen Qiao had been able to hold on for so long. First, he still had his half of his martial power as a base. Second, Duan had been injured during his fight with Li Qingyu. And third, Zhandu Mountain's martial arts complemented the 8 trigrams, Jiwi Daoshu, and even various forms of astrology. The result was exquisite and unpredictable. Because he'd never encountered it before, Duan Wenyang lost the initiative and was swept along. The fight was splendid to watch. Duan sent out lash after lash with his whip, the strikes as devastating and unstoppable as lightning. Unyielding, domineering, true Qi hammered at Shen Qiao with every curving slash of the whip weighing him down. The pressure on Shen Qiao grew and grew. He was like a piece of fragile porcelain. Beautiful, yet on the verge of breaking and unable to withstand another blow. A sharp crack sounded. The bamboo cane snapped in half. Li Qingyu immediately tossed the Shizhui sword he held to Shen Qiao. Catch! Using only his ears to discern its direction, Shen Qiao caught it firmly in his hand without even turning his head. Sword Qi swung downward, slicing into the wall of Duan Wenyang's whip after images with perfect accuracy. Well, look at you now, Li Qingyu, throwing a sword to Shen Qiao. It's about damn time. Like a mountain-felling earthquake, or the rapids of 1,000 ravines engulfing the dikes. The sword Qi screamed forth, completely unstoppable. Duan Wenyang's expression flickered as he was forced to relent and retreat. The whip's multitude of afterimages vanished and were replaced by a single arc of white light. The white light wasn't sword Qi because it lacked both form and substance. It also didn't feel like true Qi. It fluttered and flowed, the body as limber as a cloth ribbon, but also rushed after Duan Wenyang like a shadow, as if it had a mind of its own. It chased him relentlessly, unwilling to let up for a single second. What is that? Is that also sword Qi? Zhang Jishan asked in astonishment. No, it's sword intent. The one who answered was his Shidi, Zhijiang. Then why does it look different from when Li Qingyu used it earlier? Li Qingyu's sword intent was formless, but this one has form. The formless surpasses the formed, Zhang said. So Li Qingyu is a level above him? A sword's intentions are formless by nature, said Zhijiang. So how can the formless surpass the formed here? If he's capable of creating a sword intent with form, that means he's already grasped the essence of the sword and is close to the echelon of the sword heart. Understanding dawned on Zhijiang, and his good opinion of Shen Qiao transformed into fervent admiration. Now he's going to want to paint a picture of him. Duan Wenyang retreated dozens of steps in a single go, but the white sword intent lost not a hint of its edge, despite its soft and pliable appearance. It gave relentless chase, determined to capture him. The sword intent and the whip's fall met, and though the whip was made of skin of southern sea crocodiles, cured with dozens of herbs, the sword intent sliced a section of it clean off. Duan Wenyang's expression shifted. From his palm, he sent a forceful blast towards the sword intent. Like sky and water meeting where wisps had churned about the cliffs, the waterfalls cascaded into the river like bands of silk. Boundless white shattered into chaos, and all was thrown into confusion. An enormous tangible wave rolled in all directions. Everyone reeled back in alarm at the sight of it, and only after they'd taken a great many steps did they realize the deluge had not been a true wave, but rather residual sword intent in the shape of one. The crowd returned to their senses, but a chilly sensation of moisture lingered on their skin, a testimony to the power of sword intent. Jean found it fascinating and couldn't resist wiping at his face. Of course, nothing came away on his hand, but Zhejiang said that's because he hasn't completely realized a fully formed sword intent yet. If it had been perfected, there's no guarantee that us onlookers would have come away unscathed. Zhang Jixian always admired Hishidi's insight. Right away he asked, "It seems like his internal cultivation and true qi aren't in complete harmony with his sword intent. Why is that?" Zhejiang made a sound of agreement, his gaze still on the battle. "He's probably suffering from an old injury, so his internal cultivation is greatly diminished. Even if he's achieved sword intent, he can't wield it to the fullest extent. I fear he won't last much longer." Zhang Jixian quickly looked back towards Shen Qiao. He had a good opinion of Shen Qiao, and he didn't want him to lose. But within the overlapping afterimages of sword and intent and whip, it was very difficult to discern how the combatants were holding up. Duan Wenyang was getting tired. He'd lost part of his whip, and he'd been injured during his earlier duel with Li Qingyu. He'd long ago begun to regret underestimating Shen Qiao. Though he was a little lacking in terms of internal energy, his sword intent was overwhelmingly powerful. No matter how excellent Duan Wenyang's internal cultivation was, he couldn't keep expending his qi without pause. When he saw Shen Qiao's sword intent blaze all the brighter, heralding another powerful attack, he immediately lost all desire to carry on fighting. He withdrew and sped away, all while laughing. "Well, Sect Leader Shen's reputation is well deserved. I fear I don't have the time today. I shall seek your guidance another time. Farewell! I'll get you, Gadget!" That's what it sounds like. No one could stop him from leaving. Although he'd been born in the Khaganate, his qigong was exceptional, and his movements unfamiliar and perplexing. No one present could identify the source of his technique. Shen Qiao didn't give chase. He was the only person who had fought both Kunye and Duan Wenyang. Bamboo Peak. Kunye was indeed a still skilled fighter, but he would have lost their duel at Bamboo Peak if Shen Qiao hadn't fallen for that poisoning scheme. But Duan Wenyang was different. Shen Qiao might have lost most of his martial arts, but his insight was still intact, and he was astonished by how frightening and imponent Duan Wenyang was. Though he'd appeared to have the upper hand during the duel, he hadn't been able to probe the depths of Duan Wenyang's abilities. Shen Qiao had been flagging like an arrow, nearing the end of its flight, and if they'd carried on fighting, he would have certainly lost. Yet at that very moment, Duan Wenyang had chosen to retreat. As soon as he stood in place, catching his breath, Shen Qiao realized the manifesting his sword form intent had cost him more than half of his true qi. His body was terribly weak, and it was arduous even to walk normally. He could do nothing but smile bitterly to himself. Li Qingyu walked up to him. "Sect Leader Shen." Shen Qiao took the opportunity to offer Chu Shui back to him. "Thank you, Li Gongji, for lending me your sword. It's an excellent blade, but unfortunately, this Shen disgraced it with inadequacy." Li Qingyu took the proffered sword. "I misspoke just now. I don't take it to heart." Speaking humbly was obviously something rare for him. Ha! Even his apology came out a little cold and stiff. Shen Qiao smiled. "You're being too courteous, Li Gongji. If you hadn't lent me that sword just now, I fear I'd be lying dead in the courtyard." As his eyes became capable of vaguely making out the world around him, he gradually developed the habit of squinting at people and objects. So although his eyes were as spiritless as before, when beneath the sun they seemed to take on a brimming shine. Those who saw him this way couldn't help but lament. Li Qingyu stared at him for a moment. "If you have nowhere to go," he said suddenly, "Chungyang Monastery can provide you with a place to live. You need not lower yourself to depend on others, and especially not on people you dislike." Nearby, Su Chao was astonished to overhear this offer. Everyone in Chungyang Monastery knew of Ishidi's cold and steely disposition, and that he only cared for martial arts. Perhaps he felt a bit of warmth towards his master and fellow disciples, but that was all. Su Chao himself had never heard of Li Qingyu softening his words for anyone, let alone inviting someone to stay at Chungyang Monastery, and yet here he was, treating a complete stranger like Shen Qiao with such regard. Shen Qiao also seemed somewhat surprised. He froze for a second and then smiled in answer. "Well, thank you for your kindness, Li Gongji." He thanked him, but hadn't specified whether it was necessary. That meant a refusal. They were just two strangers who'd met by chance. They had little relationship with one another. Shen Qiao didn't want his affairs to cause Chungyang Monastery trouble. Li Qingyu nodded and said no more. Taking his sword, he left. Though no one said it out loud, in their hearts they all looked down on this downtrodden former sect leader. But now, After Shen Qiao and Duan Wenyang's duel, such thoughts had vanished like smoke. Yes, Shen Qiao had the advantage of fighting the second round, but if he hadn't taken action, who else could have stopped Duan Wenyang? And who could claim that they would force Duan Wenyang to withdraw? Madame Chen came over, supported by her maid. She bowed deeply to Shen Qiao, as did Su Wei and Su Qiao. "Thank you, sect leader Shen," she said, "for saving my son in time. Please accept this old woman's respects." Shen Qiao hurried to stop her. "The madam need not to be so courteous. Duan Wenyang returned and took the Duke of Mengyang County's hostage. That was most dishonorable of him. As your guest in your residence, of course it's my duty to lend my support. Regardless, from this day onward, you are the Su family's great benefactor," said Madame Chen. "Our doors will always be open to you. If Shen Zhongsheng has any requests, our Su family will do its absolute best to fulfill them." The Su family might not have been able to do very much, but even so, Madame Chen's sincere gratitude shone clearly in her fervent promise. The birthday banquet had been forced to come to an end with Duan Wenyang's interference. Everyone arrived with their spirits high and now left with them low. Puliru Jian walked out of the manor with Shen Qiao and invited him to visit his home at a later date. Then he said his farewells and went on his way. Shen Qiao was about to get into the carriage, but Zhang Jiqian called him over. "Oh, please wait, Shen Longzhun." He bowed and clasped his hands and asked, "I wanted to speak with you earlier, but I couldn't find the chance. Please grant me one request." "What's the matter? Is it something serious?" said Shen Qiao curiously. Zhang smiled. "I wanted to ask if you'll let me paint you." "Paint me?" said Shen Qiao. "Exactly," said Zhang. I've always loved painting, and my favorite subjects are gods and immortals, but though this world has all manner of people in it, where would one find a real god or an immortal? But then I saw Shen Longzhun. Out of everyone, you're the closest to my heart's ideal. That's why I wanted to ask you if you'll be my model." Oh. Shen Qiao had heard all kinds of strange requests, but this was the first time someone asked to paint him. For a moment, he didn't know how to react or reply. Before Qijiang could try to convince him further, Zhijiang walked over. "Please don't be offended, Shen Longzhun. My Qijiang is obsessed with painting, so this is normal." He cupped his hands and grabbed Zhang Jiqian's arm, making him leave. Zhang yelped a few times, but he couldn't overpower Zhijiang. He could only keep calling out to Shen Qiao. "Shen Longzhun, please don't rush to the capital. This Zhang will definitely find a day to come visit." Shen Qiao shook his head and burst out laughing. Then he turned back and stepped into the carriage. He fished out a handkerchief and coughed a mouthful of blood into it, his expression quickly turning heavy with fatigue. The injuries his sword intent had inflicted on Duan Wenyang would probably take half a month to heal, and he hadn't walked away unscathed either. His vitality and qi were damaged. He'd only been forcing himself to look unaffected. Zhijiang must have realized, and so he'd stopped Zhang Jishin from detaining him any longer. Yan Wuxi, we haven't mentioned him in a while. Yan Wuxi always loved luxury, and his subordinates always catered to his tastes, so the inside of the carriage was comfortable and lavishly decorated. Shen Qiao asked the coachman to return to the junior preceptor's residence. Then, no longer needing to conceal his condition, he leaned against the carriage wall. His expression was steeped with exhaustion, his eyebrows slightly furrowed. Unknowingly, he drifted off. His fatigue was extreme, so he fell into a deep sleep, completely dead to the world. When he woke, he found the wheels of the carriage beneath him still clattering away as they rolled, and his heart sank a little. He lifted the carriage curtain and looked out. Faintly, he could see that they were already outside the city and driving through the outskirts. In short, this was definitely not the way back to the junior preceptor's residence. "Lao Wei, is that you?" No one answered, but the carriage slowed before coming to a complete stop. The driver looked back. Though the clothes were still Lao Wei's, the face was not. It was fair and pretty, the cheeks dimpled even when no smile graced them. Even though he couldn't see the driver well, the moment they spoke, Shen Qiao knew who they were. "Say, I'm not the only one who thinks so, but the Su residence security is far too lax. I simply put on Lao Wei's clothes, donned a hat, and as long as I mimicked his voice a little, they didn't suspect a thing. There wasn't even any need to change my face. Anyone could have gone in and out of a place like that. You helped them drive Duan Wenyang off, but you won't be able to do it a second time." "Where's Lao Wei?" asked Shen Qiao. Bairong pouted. Why is Sect Leader Shen only concerned about some old man when there's a great beauty right before you? Where's your concern for me? Dead, dead. Of course I killed him. Shen Qiao smiled. I misspoke. That question was unnecessary. With your cleverness, you wouldn't risk provoking Yang Wuxi over a mere coachman. Bairong giggled. When I can kidnap the likes of you, what's a coachman? Do you mean you're afraid I won't tell you the truth? Fine, fine, telling you is no consequence. Indeed, I have no interest in killing a nobody like that. I knocked him out and left him in the Sue's family stable. Whether he lives or dies is his business. Not my problem if he gets trampled. But still, Yang Wuxi doesn't treat you well at all. He knows of your frail health and how you'll cough up blood and pass out the drop of a hat, and yet he only sent a coachman with you? Did he see this coming? Shen Qiao shook his head. My relationship with Yang Wuxi isn't what you think it is. Sure, Jan, you need not keep provoking me. Why has little Bai Niangji brought me all the way out here? Suddenly, Bairong pressed forward until her warm, scented breaths were only inches away from him. With a slight frown, Shen Qiao involuntarily leaned back, but she reached for him. As his bamboo cane snapped in Sioux residence, he had to block her with his bare hands. In an instant, they'd exchanged dozens of blows. Bairong's strikes came at incredible speed, and her hands shifting through countless gestures like a flower transforming through life, bud blossoming in full before wilting. All in the span of one breath, glory and decline, a lifetime in an instant. However, her peerlessly exquisite blue lotus seals were all blocked by Shen Qiao, as if he'd already anticipated her every move. Every time he was just a little faster than Bairong, never early nor late. Bairong hadn't witnessed Shen Qiao's fight with Duan Wenyang. Her impression of him was frozen at the feeble, sickly state she'd seen back in Huai province. When she saw him block every single one of the Blue Lotus seals, she was so proud of. She was utterly thunderstruck. When I heard you killed my Xizhong, I didn't quite believe it, she said. But now it seems it must be true. Have you recovered your martial arts? As she finished asking, Bairong dodged a blast from Shen Qiao's palm and then circled behind him and struck his acupoint. Then, without warning, she wrapped her arms around him from behind and stretched forward to peer at his face. To be born with such good looks, even though you're a Taoist priest. You'll drive us demonic practitioners out of business. Saying this, she took the liberty of kissing Shen Qiao on the tip of his nose. Oh, Yang Wuxi ain't gonna like that. Ain't gonna like that at all. Oh, in the Donghua, she just messes with him. But here, Shen Qiao's like, I did not give you consent. I did not say this was fine. I thought she was going to kiss him on the mouth, but we're not that ambitious. A little nose peck. Little nose kiss. Things were moving too fast. With Shen Qiao's vitality so greatly damaged, just meeting her strikes had been hard for him. He hadn't expected this tactic from her at all and was completely flustered, his face overcome by astonishment. Bairong giggled. I wanted to do that from the first day I saw you. Today I finally fulfilled my wish. His acupoint was sealed, so he couldn't move. Shen Qiao gave up all the meaningless struggle. What do you want? He asked. You killed Huo Zhijing and you still ask me what I want? Said Bairong. That guy Huo Zhijing, he was always fawning over Shizun, and Shizun really liked him. Now that he's dead, Shizun is really upset, so he told me to bring you back with him to deal with. The more she looked at him, the more she found Shen Qiao quite becoming. Man or woman, everyone in Heihuan sect was beautiful, but their cultivation of charm techniques, together with their lack of scruples, meant that their beauty could never give off that impression of otherworldly aloofness. If Heihuan sect were the succubi immersed in worldly desires, frolicking around indulging in the flesh, then Shen Qiao was a godly statue inside a temple, standing high above all else, devoid of both joy and sorrow. But the more heretical someone was, the more they'd want to defile that statue. But now I feel a little reluctant, said Bairong gleefully. With your good looks, you'll definitely be tortured if you fall into my Shizun's hands. Even if you don't die, you'll come close. I don't completely remember the contents of the Zhuyang Strategy's volume of diluted thought from our last encounter. If you're willing to recite it for me again so that we can compare notes, I'll let you go. I'll go back and tell Shizun I can't beat Sect Leader Yan. How about it? Zhandu Mountain has the Zhuyang Strategy's volume of Lost Soul. Since you know I'm Shen Qiao, why not ask me to recite that one for you, too? Bairong laughed. Do you take me for a fool? I've never heard of this volume of Lost Soul. I wouldn't be able to tell even if you scrambled the passages or recited any old nonsense, but I remember most of the volume of Diluted Thought, not all of it. If you switch things around on me, at least I'll know. And what if I refuse to cooperate? Asked Shen Qiao. Then this one we'll just have to hand you over to Shizun, Bairong said sweetly. Surely you've heard about my Shizun, sang Zhijing. He's many times crueler than my Shijiang Huo Zhijing. Gender makes no difference to him. He loves parasitic cultivation the most. He enjoys tormenting people in bed until they're at death's door. I dare not imagine what would happen to a beauty like you should you fall into his grasp. Shen Qiao sighed. You all take me for a fallen tiger in the plains. Someone you can do anything to, as if I'm already caught, my fate is sealed. Do you think I just let things go in a situation like this? Even if I won't go around slaughtering people, that doesn't mean I'll allow myself to be slaughtered. Bairong startled, but before she could figure out what Shen Qiao meant by that, he'd already moved. His long, slender index finger extended towards her. Spring Water's finger technique? How do you know the Spring Water's finger technique? Her face filled with terror, and Bairong leapt back. Chapter 35, Contention. One truly couldn't fault Bairong for overreacting. The demonic sex fear of Yang Wuxi ran incredibly deep. Before he'd entered secluded cultivation, Yang Wuxi had taken on all 3 demonic sects by himself. By his hand, Feijing's sect had been half annihilated. Heiwan's sect had suffered devastating losses too, just a little more, and the unification he sought would have been complete. If it hadn't been for his defeat by Cui Yongwang, which forced him to recuperate in seclusion, who knew how the 3 sects would look? Even though his efforts had fallen short, the fear of Yang Wuxi's name was etched deeply in the bones of all demonic cultivators. Since she was fairly young, Bairong hadn't been strong enough to face him in combat back then. But not long ago, her master had ordered her to assassinate Yang Wuxi's eldest disciple, Bian Yanmei, and in a stroke of misfortune she encountered Yang Wuxi himself. It had taken everything she had to escape with her life, an experience which granted her a deeper appreciation for the title Demon Lord. If Shen Qiao hadn't been alone today, she never would have risked showing herself. But when she saw Shen Qiao use the Spring Water's finger technique, the terror from her recent brush with death reared its head once again. Bairong dared not meet the approaching finger directly. Instead, she retreated backward with a flash. She was unwilling to let the prey she'd bagged fly away, though. Like a river loach, she plastered herself to the wall and slid along it, angling to grab Shen Qiao from behind. But Shen Qiao almost seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. His finger pointed suddenly became a palm strike. His strike was soft and fluttering and absent of any force, yet the internal energy contained within it was so relentless and intense that Bairong dared not take it lightly. By now, she realized that she'd massively underestimated him. When she'd witnessed Shen Qiao coughing up blood inside the carriage just a short while ago, she thought him almost spent. To think he still had so much left in him! Bairong's palms were lovely and tender, pretty and delicate, and the sight of them should have been enough to soften the heart of any man. Make them reluctant to attack, but Shen Qiao was an exception because he couldn't see! Appearance-based charm techniques had no effect on him! Their palms met, the touch whisper silent and feather-light. It was more akin to a maiden's coquettish appeal to her beloved than an exchange of attacks. Bairong felt a heavy blow slam into her chest. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Gritting her teeth, she struck at the carriage with her hand. The compartment immediately exploded. The walls splintered and the horse spooked. It galloped forward madly as Shen Qiao leapt into the air, then landed on its back, giving the reins a harsh yank. The crazed horse snorted but was forced to slow. From behind him came a low sigh. Shenlong is so gentle and sentimental, unwilling to harm even a horse. I'm a little jealous of sect leader Yan. Reluctant to give up and seeing that Shen Qiao was distracted dealing with the horse, Bairong launched herself at him. Her words overflowed with affection, but they didn't blunt the brutality of her attacks in the slightest. She struck at Shen Qiao's back, and even if she crippled him, she thought, it'd be no matter. After all, as long as he drew breath and could speak, he could still recite the volume of Diluted Thought for her. Shen Qiao heaved a sigh too, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he slid down so that he was against the horse's side. He held the reins with one hand and pressed the horse down with the other, forcing it to kneel on the ground so that it wouldn't end up hurting the crossfire. Thank you for protecting the horses, Shen Qiao! Once it was down, he pushed off the ground with a tap of his foot and sent himself flying straight at Bairong. Bairong had already suffered beneath his hands, so she dared not face him head-on again. She immediately withdrew her palm and vanished into the woods, leaving behind only a string of giggles. Shenlong is willing to protect even a horse, yet he's so cruel to me. I'll come back to play with you another day. Once he'd made sure she was truly gone, Shen Qiao found that he lacked the strength to stay upright. Supporting himself with the horse, he doubled over. His legs gave out, and he dropped to his knees to the ground. Kneeling, the horse finally calmed down. It neighed twice and tilted its head at Shen Qiao, looking at him with bright, confused eyes. Shen Qiao patted it gently. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. His words trailed off as blood surged up his throat. He couldn't suppress it. Instinctually, he slapped his hand over his mouth, but the blood trickled out between his fingers. Shen Qiao gave up trying to hold it in. His hand went slack and the blood spilled out. When it was done, he raised his sleeve to wipe at the bloodstains around his mouth. Releasing another breath, a spate of dizziness came over him. His ears rang and he staggered lightheaded. All he wanted was to collapse then and there and to close his eyes and not worry about anything ever again. Such a state wasn't foreign to him. Feebleness had overcome him, often ever since he'd been injured. His martial arts were recovering, but even so, his situation didn't improve. Every time he fought, he disturbed his injured meridians time and time again, damaging them faster than they could heal. He'd also encountered a bottleneck while cultivating the Zhiyong strategy's true qi and hadn't made any progress in a while. By itself, his original internal cultivation from Zhangdu Mountain was unable to repair his damaged foundations. Though he could claim he was used to the feeling, it was still agonizing. He was forced to lean against the horse for a brief rest, thinking that he'd get up again after the excruciating dizziness passed. With his current state, it was impossible for him to ride the horse back to the city. But just then, he heard someone speak from a short distance away. Sect Leader Shen, have you ever heard the saying, the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware that the oriole stalks it in turn? The voice was neither loud nor quiet, nor was there any swagger to it. It was simply a polite inquiry. It almost sounded as if the speaker was asking for directions instead of issuing a provocation. Shen Qiao didn't open his eyes. Honestly, he said, I'm afraid this gentleman's voice is a little unfamiliar to me. I don't think that we've met. Yes, this is our first meeting, said the newcomer, unfailingly courteous. I didn't expect Bai Rong to be a step ahead of me, but it's fortunate she was, otherwise I never would have had this wonderful chance. Are you all right? Shen Qiao shook his head. Forgive my rudeness, I can't stand! It's fine, said the man considerately. Despite his words, he didn't move to help Shen Qiao, nor did he leave. Shen Qiao sighed. I still don't know this gentleman's esteemed name. The man laughed. Though we've only just met, I feel as if we're old friends already. I was so lost in my awe, I almost forgot to introduce myself. My last name is Guang, and I come from the west of the Yellow River. At the moment, I'm a drifting roamer with no set residence. Guang was a rare last name. The number of people bearing it in the Xiongyu could be counted on one hand. What merit does this humble Shen have for someone as esteemed as the Fajin sect leader to pay me a personal visit? This humble Guang has admired sect leader Shen for a long time, said Guang Lingsong. Unfortunately, we never had the opportunity to meet before today. When word arrived that sect leader Shen had fallen from the cliff, this Guang was full of lament. I never imagined I'd get the chance to see you defeat 2 people in a row today. What a wonderful fortune! Shen Qiao forced a smile. Enough with the flowery words, sect leader Guang. If you have something to say, say it, for I fear I won't last much longer before I pass out, and then I won't be able to hear anything you wanted to say. Guang Lingsong didn't need to experience it himself to know that Shen Qiao must be in excruciating agony. Seeing that Shen Qiao could still manage to chat and laugh, his respect for him grew. Sect leader Yan took something from Fajin's sect, he told Shen Qiao. Even now he has yet to return it, so I have no choice but to invite sect leader Shen for a stay at Fajin's sect. Then I fear you've miscalculated, said Shen Qiao. All I do for sect leader Yan is waste his food. A pair of his chopsticks are probably more valuable than I am. Even speaking one sentence exhausted a great deal of his strength. After he forced the words out, he closed his eyes, his brow furrowing. His complexion was ghastly white, and he looked as if he might pass away at any moment. Guan Lingsong was also afraid that Shen Qiao might suddenly die. He reached out, wanting to check his pulse and pass him some qi. He hadn't yet touched Shen Qiao's wrist when he jerked and retreated dozens of meters. A shallow ditch had appeared in the ground where Guang Lingsan had been standing just a moment before. Outsiders all say that Sect Leader Yan brought the injured Sect Leader Shen back in order to humiliate him and make him a plaything. It looks like they may be wrong, Guan Lingsang said, all smiles. It's been so long, and Sect Leader Yan's splendor has only grown. Yang Wuxi glanced at Shen Qiao, who seemed to be either fainted or fallen asleep. His arms hung limply. A stretch of blood stained the end of his sleeve, and his eyes were closed. He was completely unconscious. Yang Wuxi swiveled his gaze back to Guang Lingshan. In my years of absence, Heihuan sect crushed Feijing sect so badly you couldn't even remain in the Central Plains, and you were forced to retreat to Tuyunhun. What an incompetent sect leader you are. Naturally, I'm not as capable as sect leader Yan, said Guan Lingsan. You've even got sect leader of Zhandu Mountain to use as a bed warmer and a host for parasitic cultivation. Everybody's just assuming everything, aren't they? You can even use him to test your martial arts. That's 3 birds with 1 stone. Everyone else is just jealous that they'll never have anything similar. At first I wanted to borrow him for a couple of days, but I didn't expect that sect leader Yan valued him so much he'd rush over here at top speed. Guan Lingsan was dressed as a scholar, and had been born with his gentle and refined looks, but his words were completely unreserved and archetypal of the demonic sects. I heard that Feijing sect had been gratefully successful in Tuyunhun over the years, so much so that Kualu Kagan trusts you completely. The more remote the location, the freer you are. You truly took to a place like a fish to water. Yang Wuxi's tone always carried a hint of ridicule. The ill-tempered would grow enraged just listening to him, but due to Yang Wuxi's martial prowess, there was nothing they could do about it. They could never defeat him, so over time this tone became a hallmark of his. Guang Lingsang smiled slightly. We cannot compare with how deeply the Lord of Zhou values sect leader Yan. Northern Zhou is under Huanye sect's influence, while Heiwan sect monopolizes the trust of the Emperor of Qi. In the south, Qin dynasty has Linchuan Academy, while the Buddhist and Taoist sects scowl on the sidelines. Our Fajing sect is alone and weak. All we could do was head far away. Yang Wuxi's graceful, slender eyes narrowed just a touch. If that's the case, why not stay in Tuyuhun and continue your operations there? Why did you come to the Zhao dynasty? Naturally, it was to seek out sect leader Yan. I would like sect leader Yan to return the Zhangchen bone to Fajing sect. Return, said Yang Wuxi with a sneer. Is your name carved upon it? It belonged to my master, said Guan Lingsang coldly. Why wouldn't it be mine? Yang Wuxi laughed. 10 years ago, you'd never have dared to say such a word to my esteemed self. Where is this bravado coming from? Just how much leopard guts did you eat all over the past 10 years? Though strength was everything in the Zhanghu, normally they also maintained a thin veneer they called morals and ethics. But the demonic sects took this principle to its most extreme. As long as you were strong, you could say almost anything you wanted. And if you were weak, even if you died, you only had yourself to blame. 10 years ago, before Yang Wuxi's secluded cultivation, he'd crushed the other 2 sects so utterly they didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. But a person could forget many things in 10 years. Even fear. Of course, Yang Wuxi's martial prowess had soared during his 10 years of seclusion, but others had made progress too. Furthermore, Guang Lingsang had been one of the top 10 martial artists in the world, or was one of them. Even if there was a gap between them, it certainly wasn't an uncrossable chasm. Shen Qiao groaned quietly as he struggled to lift his heavy lids and open his eyes. A blurred mass of shadow and light crept into his vision. It wasn't absolute darkness, but what he could see was limited. It wasn't too different from being completely blind, so he simply closed his eyes once again. A gentle voice came from beside his ear. You're awake, Shen Longjun. The medicine is ready and is still hot. The slowly one will help you drink. It was Ruru's voice. Shen Qiao recognized it, the voice of the maid from the junior preceptor's residence. She'd taken care of everything for him during this time in the junior preceptor residence. This is the junior preceptor's residence? There's some repetition there. Interesting. Shen Qiao only recalled meeting Guang Lingsan, then being unable to hold on and passing out. Ruru covered her mouth and giggled. Of course your esteemed self is in the junior preceptor's residence. Oh my god! How could Ruru be here otherwise? The master brought you back. She brought the medicine to him and helped him drink and straightened the bedding beneath him. The doctor was here and said you'd been suffering from qi and blood deficiency. You must take some blood-enriching medication. Shen Qiao nodded. Where is sect leader Yan? The master is in the study with Da Longjun. The one she called Da Longjun was none other than Bian Yanmai. Perhaps there were calming agents in the bowl of medicine, for after a few sentences, Shen Qiao involuntarily dozed off again. When he woke once more, the room was already dark, and there was a blurred silhouette at his side. Sec Leader Yan, he groped his way into a sitting position. Yan Wuxi put down the book he held but didn't move to help him, merely grunting in reply. Did Guang Lingshan left? Asked Shen Qiao. He did, said Yan Wuxi, after we fought. He's skilled, but he shouldn't have been a match for you. That was his only comment on the incident. He didn't seem surprised at Yang Wuxi's timely appearance, nor did he ask about it. I heard that you fought with Duan Wenyang in the Su residence, said Yang Wuxi. That man was incredibly skilled. Given enough time, he might become as strong as Hu Lugu was. How is he compared to Kunye? Quite a bit stronger than Kunye. In that case, you only won through pure luck. Shen Qiao didn't play himself up. True, he had just suffered some minor injuries fighting Li Qingyu, so I took advantage of that. I checked your pulse just now, said Yang Wuxi. When you fell from the cliff that day, Joyful Reunion's poison had already penetrated deep into your marrow and destroyed your foundations. I used to think that the Zhuyang strategy could repair your meridians, but examining you now, I see that having only 2 scrolls of the 5 yields minimal results. The fact that you're constantly fighting and getting injured is even more problematic. That will only worsen the damage to your Taoist core. If you go on like this and your Taoist core is completely destroyed, even the gods won't be able to save you. No matter how powerful the Zhuyang strategy is, it cannot do what even the gods cannot. The Taoist core wasn't simply a core. It held the foundations of Shen Qiao's martial arts, and it lay at the base of the internal cultivation he had built up from childhood. If his Taoist core were destroyed, then all of his moves and techniques would be rendered useless, for he can never again strive for that martial zenith. This was Shen Qiao's current situation. Due to his injury and poisoning, his Taoist core was on the verge of destruction. At this point, gradual restoration via the Zhuyang strategy's true qi should have been the best way to heal it. But the problem lay in Shen Qiao only knowing 2 of the Zhuyang strategy's scrolls instead of all 5. Making matters worse, it was impossible for him to stay uninvolved in matters within the Jianghu. Every time he fought, his qi was inevitably affected, which damaged his Taoist core. Over time, the problem became a vicious cycle. If a day came where the Zhuyang strategy's true qi could no longer repair the damage, then that would mean his foundations had collapsed completely, and he'd be beyond all saving. Incidentally, Yan Wuxi had also contributed to the repeated damage of Shen Qiao's foundations. If he hadn't forced Shen Qiao to fight him again and again, Shen Qiao wouldn't be adding new injuries on top of his old, unhealed ones. But at the moment, Sec Leader Yan's expression was earnest and solemn, as if he'd selectively forgotten his share of the responsibility. Shen Qiao didn't know whether to call him shameless or egotistical. Are you saying you have a solution? Yan Wuxi was unruffled. Indeed I do. If you're willing to toss out your Taoist core and allow me to implant a demonic core inside of you, and then you cultivate the Fanglin scriptures, and everything will be solved in one stroke. Shen Qiao sighed. I cannot help but admire Sec Leader Yan's careful and meticulous execution of his plans. Once the demonic core is implanted, I'll inevitably become a temperamental and erratic, savage and bloodthirsty. It might be a happy thing for you, but for me it would be like losing my true self. Even if it greatly advanced my martial arts, what meaning would there be for me? Yan Wuxi took a mocking expression. What is true self? Humans are evil by nature. Is doing as you desire not true to your true self? Look at that Chen Gong. You showed him so much kindness and even traveled together, sharing with him trials and tribulations. But when a crisis arose, even though there were clearly 100 different ways he could have extricated himself, all he thought was to draw the disaster to you and drag you down with him. Given his background, no one ever taught him how to read or behave. What he did was, how is that not true to his true self? Shen Qiao wanted to turn his head away, but he was forcibly yanked back by one hand on that chin, preventing his escape. There was only one reason you were able to faithfully follow your Taoist core and refuse to give up on your so-called principles, said Yan Wuxi. It's because you've never been in a situation so hopeless that you could no longer endure. Am I right? A pair of dull, vacant eyes blinked, their long eyelashes trembling. After a long time, Shen Qiao finally spat out a word. Yes. Yang Wushi's tone brimmed with malice. No matter how powerful the Zhuyang strategy is, it can't create something out of nothing. There is no way you'll recover your martial arts in a couple of years with the state that you're in. Your foundations are damaged. You're fainting and vomiting blood at the drop of a hat. You might even linger in this half-dead state the rest of your life. Now that everyone's seen you appear at the Su residence with the junior preceptor's invitation, news of our relationship will spread quickly throughout the Jianghu. My venerable self has enemies everywhere. They can't touch me, but you're an easy target. What do you think they'll do to you if they catch you? Will they torture you into writing out the Zhuyang strategy? Will they rape you and kill you first and then rape your corpse some more out of spite? When that happens, can you still find such a situation endurable? Finally, Shen Qiao couldn't take it anymore. We can talk about that when it actually happens. Sec Leader Yan need not to trouble himself before then. Yan Wushi's hand had been slapped aside, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he snorted a laugh, his mood lightening. Come on, I was only scaring you a little. Just that was enough to upset you? Shen Qiao was speechless. There was a saying that grasping a woman's heart was like finding a needle on the ocean floor. But Shen Qiao felt that grasping Yang Wushi's heart was as impossible as finding a needle in the bottomless abyss. At that moment, it might be easier than you think. At that moment, there came a knock on the door. Enter, said Yan Wushi. The maid Ruru came in with a bowl of medicine. Master, this is the second bowl of soup that was prepared for Shen Longjun today. Put it here, said Yan Wushi. Ruru put the bowl down as asked and then reminded Shen Qiao, Shen Longjun must drink it while hot for the utmost effectiveness. Shen Qiao thanked her and took the bowl and drank it in one gulp. Shen Qiao had one small shortcoming. He liked sweet things and he hated bitter ones. As a child on Jiangdu Mountain, whenever he got sick, he would hide and refuse to take his medicine. But when he heard that internal cultivation can make one impervious to the heat and the cold, he put his all into his training. Everyone else thought he was being extra hardworking, when in truth, he was just trying to escape the bitter medicine. But here at Yang Wushi's residence, no matter how many bowls of medicine were brought to him, he drank them all without objection. His little habits betrayed him, though. Every time he raised the bowl, his brows would furrow a little, and when he put the bowl down, the corners of his mouth would twitch. Yang Wushi saw all of this. When Shen Qiao finished the medicine, he picked up a candied preserve from the table and shoved it into Shen Qiao's mouth. Ah Qiao, if you dislike bitter things, he said in a honey tone, I'll ask them to put some barley sugar in your medicine in the future. Now smile for me. Don't frown so much. Shen Qiao, lost for words, was utterly exhausted in both body and mind. Oh my gosh! Oh, well, we got some sugar in this chapter set, didn't we? Well, that was a great chapter set to start us off with Thousand Autumns Volume 2. I'm like, Volume 2? All right, let's get to it. So we got to chapter 36. We got to right to the end of chapter 35. The censorship be damned. She actually gave him a little peck. We're gonna talk about Bairong in that. But man, if Yan Wushi had seen her do that, I don't think she would have existed. So we'll see about that. But anyway, so we got through chapter 32 to 35. We made a little dent in this volume actually already. So like I said, we're gonna have seven weeks. We're gonna be like in the heat of summer by the time we get to volume 3. That's gonna be crazy. But yeah, so we're in the midst of a volume 2 here right off the bat, and I listened to the audio drama, and the audio drama had an extra scene that was not in the novel that I was like, oh, okay. Which they did this back in volume 1. Right when it was between Yan Wushi and Yu Xinyan, they were talking about like, well, why aren't you following Shen Qiao around? And Yan Wushi's like, because he's fine. I don't need to. I want to talk a little bit about that because I honestly kind of respect the fact, like in the Donghua, it makes it seem like Yan Wushi is kind of following Shen Qiao around to make sure that he's, being on the path that Yan Wushi wants him to be upon. In the novel, he really does kind of take a back seat, and he doesn't really follow Shen Qiao around unless he really feels like he's for sure in danger, as he does in this by the end of this chapter set. But It's kind of interesting because in the audio drama, the audio drama, by the way, does not end where the audio drama only goes up to really like partway through chapter 34, which is in like to the end of into chapter 35, which when I was organizing the chapters, the moderator and Reiki had put together the compilation, and it did say for episode 7 of the audio drama, it covered chapters 32 through 35, but then it said for audio drama episode 8, it covered chapters 35 to whatever. So I did wonder if the audio drama was going to like cut off halfway through chapter 35. It did, but that's okay. We'll make up for it next week. I'll get to hear it next week. I was really disappointed because I wanted to hear Yang Wuxi and Shen Qiao's conversation at the end. I was like, oh, come on. But, we'll get that next week. It'll be fine. So it ends right after Guang meets Yang Wuxi in the woods with Shen Qiao. That's where the audio drama episode 7 ends. I'm watching it through Treasure Chest subs. If you have access to their Discord, they have the audio dramas there you can listen to if you have access. So anyway, but there's an extra scene in the audio drama episode, and it is a conversation. Like, it basically takes place right after Duan Wenyang, right after he defeats, well, he doesn't defeat Li Qingyu. They just kind of meet at a draw and then he goes away. There's an added scene of Yang Wuxi talking to the Emperor, which was really interesting. And we're gonna talk about that here in a minute, but I'm gonna come back to this. I want to kind of go through and take this all like in chronological order. But chapter 32 is mainly about a duel. It's a battle. It's mainly the description of a battle. So Duan, it's also kind of hyping Duan up that he is a foe to be messed with. I want to also point out that his name is very taxing to say over and over and over again. And I know that's his name. I'm going to have to do it. But Duan Wenyang, saying that name, the only other name that's more taxing is Zhan Zijian. I'm like, oh my God, the alliteration. Why the alliteration? I was like, author, please spare us. And the author's like, no. So I want to call him just Duan, and that's like Puliuru Zhan. I just want to call him Zhan. And I apologize if that offends anybody, because I know Chinese names, like, you really need to say the full name. But damn, it is taxing. It is so taxing to say. If there's an audio drama of this book, bless the audio drama. Or if there is an audiobook version of this, bless them, because it is really taxing to say that. But this is really to hype him up, because he basically versed Li Qingyu, comes out at a draw, but he'd also been battling Su Qiao, which that did not turn out to be as much of a battle. Su Qiao kind of lost that one. And then he also got to face Shen Qiao. So Duan got to face a lot of people and make a statement. And the statement is basically, yeah, Kunyei's getting a lot of the reputation. He's doing a lot of the work on the front lines. He's like, but don't forget about me. I'm also Hulugu's disciple, and I'm probably the one that's going to surpass and succeed him more than Kunyei. So we just have to keep that in mind about him as we go through the story. But yeah, what also is crazy is that Duan came there to get certain things, which he did. He did get the ring. He got the ring from Madame Chen, who we find out, old Madame Chen, she had a thing for Hulugu. They might have had a thing together. Duan's not very happy about it, but he can't deny it. So there's like all this, like, people came to this birthday party just to like mingle, watch some dancing, eat some good food, and instead they're getting like a whole family drama unfurl in front of them. I'm like, you thought only in the depths of redneck society could you get such family drama on public display. It's like people having like a brawl in a Chuck E. Cheese parking lot after a kid's birthday party. That's literally what this equated to. And I'm kind of all here for it. I can relate. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to read. But yeah, so they got the ring from Madame Chen. He also wanted to threaten their cousins. Again, like, what the fudge is this family brawl just taking place? Wanted to threaten the cousins, and that didn't quite go to plan so much. But yeah, and also to kind of hype himself up. So basically did that. But these poor Sue brothers, they find out their mom was a bit, had maybe an affair with another man. And so they're dealing with that drama. Duan is challenging Shen Qiao, or Su Qiao, and Shen Qiao. But I felt so bad for Shen Qiao in this chapter set because, first of all, Shen Qiao went there on Yan Wushi's behalf. He doesn't know anybody. He's made a friend with Xian. He knows the Liu Guild leader, but he's kind of absent in this chapter set. We just see that he's there. He doesn't know anybody, and he's all by himself. Xian becomes his new bestie, and so they're just hanging out. And he's just minding his own business. He's there for someone else on their behalf. And Duan, who did not come there for Shen Qiao, by the way, just is in the middle of all this and is like, oh, and another thing, this guy over here sucks. And Shen Qiao's like, gee, thanks. I'm just here having a good time. Can't really defend myself from your taunts, but thank you, sir. Like, poor Shen Qiao. I mean, Shen Qiao is capable of defending himself by and large, but I felt so bad for him. I was just like, he did not ask to be called out by Duan, and Duan really had no reason to call him out except he was just being a bitch. And it's like, damn, that sucks. Poor Shen Qiao. So yeah, so they end up fighting. Su Wei is not a fighter, as we find out. Su Wei is actually one of the guys that Duan tries to target because he knows that he's easy prey. And Su Qiao tries to defend his brother, tries to defend their mom. Doesn't go great. Li Qingyu, who is Su Qiao's bestie, steps in. Li Qingyu is interesting because he comes across in the novel to me. I was trying to think of when I realized he was the one that invited Shen Qiao to stay at his house afterwards to not be debased by Yan Wuxi. And Shen Qiao's like, he's actually not that bad. I don't know. When he brought that up, in the reaction reading, it took me a second to be like, oh, that was him. Oh, ooh. Because in the Donghua, he seems much older and he seems a little bit more reverent. And in the Donghua, he does not come across nearly as arrogant as he does in the novel. In the novel, he strikes me as way younger and comes across way more arrogant and just thinks not much of Shen Qiao until Shen Qiao shows him up, and it's like, damn. It's kind of like a Qin Gong situation, only in reverse. Whereas in the Donghua, actually, no, it's kind of the same. In the Donghua, Qin Gong seems a lot older than he is in the novel. And then when you get to the novel, you're like, oh, this kid's 16. Justifies everything. And it kind of is an interesting subversion where with Li Qingyu's character in the novel, he seems way younger than he does in the Donghua, and he also seems less mature. So interesting how the impressions go with that, right? Interesting how that goes. But yeah, so we find out about sword intent. So I like that in the novel, in chapter 32, Duan doesn't want to battle there inside. He's like, I think that's also important to note that Duan is not someone that likes battling in closed situations. He likes being out in the wide open. Also, it makes sense he needed to plan an escape. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that might be some something to file away in your brain, that maybe if Shen Qiao can get him in a cramped space where he can't use the whip as effectively, might be a way to take him down. I don't know. Don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But they go outside. It's really funny because in the audio drama, when he's like, let's take this battle outside, you boop, and zoinks, the audio drama uses that exact moment to start the opening credits. It's a great segue moment. It's perfectly planned. Really nice. But yeah, so they go outside. Shen Qiao says, I can't see anything, but I can hear everybody. That's how I'm keeping track of everything. And they basically come to the conclusion that Kunye is strong, but Duan is stronger. So we're just gonna note that. So then they also talk about how they basically talk about the Gok Turks and their relationship with Northern Zhou and Northern Qi. And so the Gok Turks, they had been in the Central Plains, and Kunye and them are slowly trickling back into the area, and that they're going to probably have a hand in all the battles that are going to go down later. So we need to keep track of that. So then we find out that Li Qingyu has been able to unlock his sword intent. He's able to unlock his sword intent. And it's kind of cool. It looks like lightning. It's pretty interesting. And I thought it was actually a really cool ending to chapter 32. And everybody's like, sword intent. He's achieved sword intent. Like, it was pretty epic. I liked that a lot. It was a great end to the chapter. So we come to the conclusion that there are 4 echelons of the sword. So the 4 echelons, which we're going to put up here, 4 echelons of the sword. Get there. We have the chi, we have intent, we have heart, and we have spirit. Nice. Which the chi seems like the outward spiritual energy, and then you're slowly going inward. You have the out surface level, then you have the intent, which is like your purpose, kind of defining it. The heart is truly understanding it, and the spirit is incorporating it within your actual being, where it's like breathing. So that's kind of cool. I like the explanation on that. It's like leveling up, and both Qingyu as well as Shen Qiao have kind of reached that stage, which is a lot of fun to find out in these chapters. But yeah, a lot of this chapter is the battle, which we've seen it in the Donghua. We talked about it in here. The one thing that I kind of get, it always throws me off in Donghua and Donmai, especially Donmai. I've seen it with MXTX's works. I've seen it, maybe not as much with Word of Honor, but especially in Heaven Official's Blessing. I love Heaven Official's Blessing to pieces, but but there are some moments in that series where I'm like, didn't we just come here? Haven't we already done this? Are we repeating this scenario? And Dwan, like, fighting and then going away and then immediately coming back, I was like, this felt like one of those moments. However, I get why the author does it, because Dwan has to like leave so that Li Qingyu can have this conversation with Shen Qiao and insult him and be kind of a jerk. And then when Dwan comes back and Shen faces him, it kind of takes the foot of Li Qingyu and shoves it in his mouth. And if you think about it, I am aware that I'm assuming that like MXTX's works were on a website and she was publishing like chapter to chapter for people to read. I assume this work was maybe published originally in the same format for fans. So it could be one of those things where we got the battle and then fans like the next week read him coming back and it's like, so when it's actually published as a standalone novel, it kind of has a different feel to it. It is a little repetitive, but I'm okay with it, is the basic like gist of all of this. And I get why the author does it, but man, Li Qingyu, he was really kind of a jerk to Shen Qiao. He was kind of a jerk. I was like, he comes back afterwards and he's like, man, it's a shame I wasn't born when your master was around, because otherwise I might have actually given him something to look forward to. And I'm like, oh, like just kind of insulting to Shen Qiao. And you know what? I feel like we're going to talk about this conversation here in a second, but I think Yang Wuxi was expecting that. And he wanted to see how Shen Qiao would react to it. And of course, Shen Qiao does not react in the way that Yang Wuxi wants him to react, which is part of it. So in the audio drama, when the first battle between Dwan and Li Qingyu ends and everything kind of dies down, before we get back to this conversation, it's either before we get back to this conversation with Li Qingyu and Shen Qiao or immediately afterwards. It's one of the two. We cut to this scene where Yan Wuxi and Yu Wangyun, the emperor, are having a sit-down conversation. So instead of going to the birthday party, Yan Wuxi has a conversation with the emperor. And it's really fascinating. So, a couple takeaways from this. Yan Wuxi definitely, he tries to play it really cool in the conversation. He sounds very languid and cool and mature. He's not flirting with the emperor. For the record, there is no hint of that whatsoever at all. So he's just having a conversation. He's very mature, very professional. And he's basically just, he doesn't seem like he's invested in Shen Qiao. He's just like, he wants him to stand his ground. He's like, Shen Qiao's a big boy. He can do it all himself. I'm not going to go help him. I don't need to. He's running this like boy's errand for me. I'm fine with it. But he also seems to have this ulterior motive that he wanted Shen Qiao to go, because he says to the emperor that Shen Qiao is essentially someone who's used to being praised for his prowess and his ability, but also because of his status and his mentor. So he wants Shen Qiao to see how fake people can be. Because he's like, now that Shen Qiao has fallen from grace and he's not the person he used to be and he doesn't have Mount Zhandu backing him, he tells the emperor, he's like, well, he's going to see how fake these people are and how they're going to ridicule him and see how the people who once supported him are going to look down upon him. And basically, Yang Wushi's like, all people are evil, and he wants Shen Qiao to realize that, and he's like, he's putting him in this scenario so it will happen. Little does Yang Wuxi know that Shen Qiao's cinnamon roll goodness is going to sway everybody, right? For the most part. So, but that's what he tells the emperor. Other things are that the emperor apparently knows that Duan is going to go there. He knows he has beef with the Sioux. He knows all this is going down. He's kind of like, what's the worst he could do? Is kind of the mentality that he has. It seems like he has an agenda. The emperor has an agenda of his own, and he's well aware that Duan could cause some issues, but he's fine with it. And Yang Wuxi kind of calls him out, being like, you're kind of okay being the bad guy. And the emperor's like, yeah. So maybe that's why they get along so well, But the other thing is the emperor sounds a little sickly. He has a couple of those little, like, got the black lung, the death coughs. He gives a couple of those in the audio drama, which does not bode well. I'm like, you're not in great health. Also, he wants to meet Shen Qiao. For the record, the emperor says he wants to meet Shen Qiao. He's like, I want to meet this kid. And I'm like, oh, okay. And Yang Wuxi tries to play it so cool. He's like, oh, you want to meet him? I mean, he's just nobody special. He's trying not to put Shen Qiao out there, But he says, he talks a little bit at one point about how, well, Yang Wuxi's trying to make sure the emperor understands that Shen Qiao's not at full health yet. He's like, oh, well, he hasn't been able to heal himself all the way. He's still struggling doing this. And the emperor's like, well, there's no medicine that can cure you. So, and I was like, woo! So the emperor gets kind of sassy with Yang Wuxi, and Yang Wuxi kind of takes it, which is interesting to listen to. Also, by the end of their conversation, the emperor says, you're never around, Yang Wuxi. He's like, he wants Yang Wuxi to go and start teaching lessons to the crown prince since he's never around, so the crown prince will remember that he's actually there as the preceptor. And I was like, I was trying to wrap my brain around Yang Wuxi teaching any small child anything, and I was like, what? But maybe the crown prince is not a small child. Maybe the crown prince is like a teenager or a young man. But still, the idea of the emperor having Yang Wuxi teach anyone anything is just, I was like, what? Short-circuited as I was listening to that. But yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. So I'm curious if we're going to tie back to that. But interesting indeed. Interesting indeed. So yeah. So anyway, after that conversation, we cut back to basically Duan coming back and trying to attack Su Wei because he's an easy target since he's not a fighter. Madam Chen's like, don't touch my son was really good. And at the end of chapter 33, that's when Shen Qiao's like, y'all were ridiculing me. Y'all were saying shit behind my back, but I took it like a pro, and now I'm striking back again. Electric Boogaloo style. And chapter 34 was really fun. Chapter 34 was like the Donghua, where he battles Duan on the roof. It was good. Him using the sword intent. That was a lot of fun as well. And Duan, I mean, at this point, Duan has kind of fought 3 people by now. So he's kind of wore down. And Shen Qiao was literally saving up all the gas he had in the tank to try to get through and do this attack. Also, I like that during their battle, we find out the whip that Duan has is made of Southern Sea crocodiles. Go for it. Go for it, my dude. Very cool. Love it. Classy. I want to see him like a crocodile skin hat now. I don't know. I want to see Western Duan. I want to see his Western wear with I imagine alligator skins, but it would be 7 Seas crocodiles. Or Southern Seas. 7 Seas crocodiles! The Don Mai crocodiles! 7 Seas crocodiles, y'all. But, Jean Jixian, or Jixian, however you say his name, I feel like the Z's are J sounds, so it's like John Jixian. His name is so hard for me to pronounce. But he gets to be like a Shen Qiao fanboy in this chapter set. Like him and Ji Jiang are talking about it. he becomes a fanboy, decides that Shen Qiao needs to become the Rose to his Jack Dawson. He's like, I'm going to draw you wearing the Hope Diamond necklace. And Shen Qiao's like, what? Paint me, huh? Again, I felt kind of a Heaven Official's Blessing vibe with the painting. Although, Jean better be careful and not let Yang Wuxi find out about that, or Yang Wuxi will not let him paint Shen Qiao. Except with his own blood. Maybe. But yeah, so the duel and everything goes pretty much like it does in the Donghua, and Li Qingyu, he basically apologizes, and it's like, I was kind of a jerk. I should not have underestimated you. And I think there's a lesson here, because Shen Qiao takes it all. Shen Qiao does the very Jesus thing and turns the other cheek. Because originally he just didn't say anything. He was like, whatever. Y'all say what you want about me and Yang Wuxi. I don't care. It's fine. And then by the end of it, Li Qingyu was apologizing and offering him a place to stay at the monastery, at the Chuyang Monastery. And all the other people there are like, he never does this. And I'm like, Shen Qiao's just slowly gathering the harem. Much to Yang Wuxi's chagrin. And so, yeah, he just kind of makes a friend, makes an ally, because that's what Shen Qiao does. I loved the wording of, it's at the end of page 30, it's at the end of page 37, where he says, but now after Shen Qiao and Duan Wenyang's duel, such thoughts had vanished like smoke. I like everybody that had a downtrodden impression of Shen Qiao suddenly changes their mind. The funny thing is about all of this is that Yang Wuxi, he wants Shen Qiao to realize all of humanity are evil, and he wants Shen Qiao to kind of suffer, we assume, as he has in previous settings. But the funny thing is that I'm like, Yang Wuxi, you were won over and wooed by Shen Qiao. How did you not see it happening to everyone else around him? How do you not think that everyone else is going to be wooed as well? The answer is that Yang Wuxi does not really... I don't think Yang Wuxi has realized he's been wooed. I don't think he's realized he's been wooed. I think he assumes that he's just playing games with Shen Qiao and just poking and teasing him. And he's like, I'm not in love. I don't have feelings to him. And then... I don't know if it's going to be in this volume or not, but whenever he figures out he's got feelings, it's going to be like a uh-oh moment real big. Right now, he doesn't realize that he has feelings, and he's just like, we're just playing games. And it's like, uh-oh, somebody's about to catch him real quick. So, yeah. But yeah, and that's when Jean tells he wants to paint him. So, I thought that in the novel, we had a much... easier transition from this scene to Bai Rong confronting him in the carriage. I don't remember why. The Donghua made it seem maybe a little bit more clunky. In the novel, it's pretty smooth. He's like, thank you guys for inviting me over. Nice to meet you, Jean. We'll talk about that painting later. Gotta go back and report back to Yang Wuxi. See y'all. Peace out. And he gets in the carriage and kind of like, it makes a lot more sense in the novel that as soon as he gets in the carriage, Shen Qiao is just exhausted. He just becomes a mound. He's just like, oh my God, I'm so done. That was so much energy. That was such a crazy birthday party. Don't want to go to any more after this. I'm done. And he kind of isn't paying attention and drifts off to sleep. And when he wakes up, he realizes the carriage is not going back to Yang Wuxi's. It is not going back to where it was supposed to. And then Bai Rong reveals herself. The audio drama, as well as this, makes it also a little bit more apparent that there is kind of an age difference between Shen Qiao and Bai Rong. In the audio drama, at one point, Shen Qiao says, you know, you're really young, Bai Rong, to like maybe, and I don't know if the translation means age-wise or maturity-wise, but it makes it seem like, you know, Shen Qiao's in his 30s, she's in her late teens, there's an age gap there, and he kind of is like, you're being kind of immature, you know, Bai Rong. And she just is like, what are you talking about? But yeah, also we get the reveal that Bai Rong is maybe not as murderous as some of her other demon sect companions. She doesn't kill the driver. She left him back at the stable. She also had the chance to possibly kill Shen Qiao, or at least immobilize him, and she doesn't do it, so... Being awfully incompetent as far as your boss would be concerned. Now, she does do a really good job of framing how scary San Jijing is. Because she's like, oh, if you thought Huo was bad, he's much, much worse. and she basically insinuates it's kind of like if Huo and Mutipo were combined together, in the sense that he's a lot more cruel, but he also likes to sexually exploit some of his prisoners and like suck their energy out that way. I don't think I want to find out what that's like, so I'm not looking forward to us getting to that section. Not looking forward to that at all. But I didn't expect her to kiss him until she got near him, and then when she went for the kiss, I thought she'd like kiss him on the lips, but only one person is allowed to do that, and that's not going to happen for a while. So probably like at the end of the story. So she does give a little boop on the nose, like a little peck on the nose, which I thought was interesting. Not a cheek, not a lips, but a little nose, little Eskimo kiss. Only instead of rubbing noses, she actually gives it a little peck on the tip. So I don't know if that peck on the tip is supposed to be an innuendo for anything, but anyway, the way that the artist draws her with Shen Qiao, she does seem just really young. And the way that their conversation is, it just seems like, oh, I've been wanting to do this. It's very much like girl that has a crush on somebody, but it's like a young little like teenage love. It's very Katy Perry, and Shen Qiao is like not amused. Shen Qiao's like, I did not grant consent for this, so how about we don't? But yeah, so she reveals that she wants his like remaining thoughts about the diluted thought Zhuyang strategy. She's like, I want that. And Shen Qiao's like, if you need the Zhuyang strategy, why don't you just go to the one in Zhangde Mountain? I like he throws Ui and them under the bus. He's like, they can defend it. It'll be fine. Go after that one. And she's like, no. She's like, I've never heard of the Volume of Lost Souls. She's like, if I tell you to recite it, you might be lying. She's like, I know most of the diluted thought, so I just need you to clarify a few things so I can make sure I've wrote it down right. And I'm like, look, clever girl, clever girl. And so he's like, what if I do if I refuse to cooperate? And she's like, she threatens him that Song Jijing would try to like sexually exploit him. And Shen Qiao is just like, all you people do, you're all just promiscuous. What's going on? Shen Qiao's just kind of over it. But Shen Qiao defends himself going into chapter 35 and uses the spring waters technique, and Bai Rong is kind of freaked out by it. And unlike the Donghua, we do get an explanation of it in the novel, where we find out that Bai Rong had tried to confront Bian Yanmei, and she ran into Yan Wuxi instead. And I thought it was kind of interesting where, Yan Wuxi, he nearly like took her life, but to me, it kind of reads between the lines. Yan Wuxi tries to come across as being this like smooth, suave, arrogant bastard that doesn't care about anything, and like he's above it all. But then there's like little things behind the scenes that I'm like, but you do care. You're a big old tsundere, but you do care. Because like this whole thing with Bai Rong, her trying to attack Bian Yanmei, she encountered Yan Wuxi, and Yan Wuxi kind of like nearly killed her. I'm like, was he doing that because she was also trying to attack his disciple? I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe he didn't really even care. Maybe, I don't know. But, I mean, he did, try to attack her in retaliation, so that was interesting. But yeah, so Shen Qiao manages to defend himself a little bit. And then him, like, going up against the horse, like, she ends up sparing him. I think she sensed that Guang was coming, and she didn't want to stick around, because then she'd have to deal with one, Guan kind of being like, why couldn't you finish the job? What are you going to tell your boss? And also she just didn't want to deal with him. And she doesn't want to kill Shen Qiao. So she's like, I'll just go. Bye. I'll get you gadget next time. Da, da, da. But yeah, poor Shen Qiao, like distracted with his horse and like making sure the horse is okay. Like after all the equinocide we've had to deal with, all these Donmai and Donghua, I'm like, good. Someone's sparing the horses. Great. As I'm recording this like a week after the Kentucky Derby. Spare the horses. So that was fun. That was really fun. But yeah. So Shen Qiao, like, I like that the horse just kind of like protected him in a way. And then he kind of passes out because at this point he is spent. At this point, everything is just, he's fought Duan Wenyang, he's fought Bai Rong, everything. And him and Yan Wuxi kind of come to the same conclusions, where he keeps getting injured, and the Zhuyang strategy is doing all it can to help him heal, but it's just getting him like he'll be Yang Wuxi kind of points it out. He's like, where Shen Qiao is now, he had all this poison. So we'll just use this little skull, do some crossbones there. So he had this poison. So if he was originally up here, after the poison, it keeps dropping him down. And he'll start to bounce up. Like, he'll start to be using the Zhuyang strategy to start to get a little bit better, but then he'll have an attack, and then he'll go down. And then he'll start to go back, and then he'll get attacked, and then it'll go down. And then he'll start to go, and he'll get down. And it's getting to where, like, he can't rise back to where he once was. He keeps getting knocked back down, and he's not making any progress, and it's actually getting worse. So, which Yang Wuxi points out, he's like, you can't help but get involved because now everybody knows who you are, and now they've seen you at this birthday party. So it almost seems like, and Shen Qiao kind of points it out, Yang Wuxi does not want to take any accountability for any of this, because he did send him to the birthday party, and he has been training with him that has influenced this and caused some impact to this, but Yang Wuxi doesn't want to take any responsibility for that. It's not his fault. So that's something that I feel like is going to have to come up later on in the story, but right now it's just getting brought up. But anyway, so he ends up meeting Guang. Guang, what was his leader's name? What was his whole full name? Guang Lingsan. So Guang Lingsan, he meets him. He doesn't seem as slimy as he does in the Donghua. He seems a little bit different. His voice sounds a little bit deeper, but I think it's the same voice actor. But we'll see. Yang Wuxi hasn't officially described him to Shen Qiao, so, or at least I don't think so. Not in the way that he did in the Donghua. So yeah, so we find out that Guang Lingsan said that Yan took something from them, and he wants it back. And Shen Qiao's like, I don't want to be involved. He's like, I'm about to die. Let me not be involved in anything going on. And then that's when Yang Wuxi shows up. And he says, you're not even capable as a sect leader. You've even got the sect leader of Zhandu Mountain to use as a bed warmer and a host for parasitic cultivation. And you can even use him to test your martial arts. That's 3 birds in 1 stone. Now listen, one, I don't think that Yang Wuxi is using it for parasitic cultivation. Not that we know of. 2, they are not bed warmers yet, sir. And now 3 is true. He does want to use them to test his martial arts. But that's, he's not been very successful with that either. So Yang Wuxi's like, gee, Willikers, don't threaten me with a good time. Wish that was the case. I don't know if Yang Wuxi would do the parasitic cultivation with him. That seems to be a Heihuan sect thing, but Guang Lingsan is like tempting him about it. So yeah. And so Yang Wuxi's like, what the hell are you doing here? Why are you trying to threaten Shen Qiao? What are you doing? He's like, why did you come to the Zhou Dynasty? And he's like, well, I came to seek out you. I want the Jiangqin bone. And Yang Wuxi's like, why? He's just like, he's like, you got a lot of gall coming up here and asking me for things that I've probably lost. So they don't ever resolve. If they had a battle over the bone that he needs, we don't get to see the outcome. We know that Yang Wuxi either won or escaped through a draw because we don't see Guang and he takes Shen Qiao back to the preceptor's palace. So, but we basically established at that point that that Guang Lingsong has been improving his game in the 10 years that Yang Wuxi has as well. So anyway, I like Ruru. Ruru's really sweet. She goes and gets him some medicine, and then she's like, oh, the master's in the study with Bian Yanmei. So what have they been talking about? We don't know. Now, sect leader Yan comes back to see Shen Qiao at the end of this chapter, and he's being very stoic at first. He's just like, yeah, what? I'm like, dude, you came and rescued Shen Qiao when he was on death's door. You brought him back. You got him medicine. You're talking with Bian Yanmei, who thinks you guys are together. Like, come on. Come on, Yang Wuxi. And Yang Wuxi's like, I don't know. We just fought. Guan Lingsong and I, we fought. I'm not going to tell you what the outcome was because I don't want to admit if I was, struggling or anything. He, doesn't want to say that. And he's like, he asks him about Kunye versus Duan. Asks him how that was. And then he's like, I checked your pulse. And this is where Yang Wuxi kind of gets frustrated because he's like, we're just kind of just running in circles. Nothing is getting fixed. It's just getting worse because you keep on trying to get your powers back, but then you keep getting on into fights. And there's a point in this where he says something that I'm like, oh. And I don't think Yang Wuxi has realized what he's saying, but it's there. We, the audience, can get it. He says here, what does he say there? He goes, the Taoist core wasn't any simple. It holds the foundations of the martial arts. And so he says something in here where he talks about what to do. Yeah, he says the fact that you're fighting getting injured is more problematic. That will only worsen the damage to your core. So he says this, if you go on like this, your Taoist core will be completely destroyed, and even the gods won't be able to save you. And at that point, Yang Wuxi's like, if your Taoist core gets destroyed, it doesn't matter if we find all 5 volumes. We're not going to find it in time. He doesn't think that that's possible. And then there's going to be no point in saving you. You won't ever get to be completely healed. Now, Yang Wuxi right now has said that he only wants Shen Qiao completely healed so that they can fight each other and he can see who's the stronger person. And that matters a lot to him because Qi Fengge is dead and Shen Qiao's the closest he has to that. But then he's like, you can never again strive for that martial zenith. So we explained the current situation, and he says, incidentally, he had also contributed to the repeated damage, but he's not going to take on that share of the responsibility. And Shen Qiao kind of knows that, but he's not saying anything about it. He doesn't know whether to call him shameless or egotistical. And I'm like, Road to El Dorado, why can't it be both? Why can't he be shameless and egotistical? And so he's like, well, let's see if what solution do you have to the problem? So Yang Wuxi says, I got this. Go find the 5 volumes. We ain't got time for that. No. All you have to do, Shen Qiao, is take out your core. If you toss the Taoist core, because that thing is ruined. Get that one out there. It's poisoned. No good. Replace with a demonic core. And then just study my type of cultivation, and then we can solve everything. And Shen Qiao is like, that's not what I want. Because Shen Qiao says, if I have this demonic core, I'll become temperamental and eventually erratic and savage and bloodthirsty. And he's like, it's not going to be a happy ending, and I'd lose my true self. Even if I greatly advance my martial arts, what meaning would there be? And so Shen Qiao's like, well, I wouldn't be myself if I did that. And Yang Wuxi's like, well, humans are evil by nature anyway, so what difference does it make? And I'm like, Yang Wuxi. Now, what ends up happening in the Donghua is that Yang Wuxi, inserts some demonic energy into Shen Qiao that does eventually, override and kind of, broil over his original core, which kills the poison. So, I guess we'll get to that in that explanation of it. Maybe in this volume, maybe. I don't know if it'll be this volume or next volume, though. I don't know. Maybe this volume. We'll see. We'll see how far we get with the story. But then he's like, so here's the thing. He says, humans are evil by nature. Is doing as you desire not true to your true self? Look at Qinggong. And he talks about Qinggong. And, Shen Qiao wanted to turn his head away, but he was yanked back by a hand on his chin, preventing his escape. He's like, there was only one reason you were able to faithfully follow your Taoist core and refuse to give up your so-called principles, because you've never been in a situation so hopeless you can no longer endure. Am I right? I like that. So Yang Wuxi, at first Yang Wuxi seems like he's being really mean. And he's like, you're only in this situation and you can only stay how you are because you've never been pushed to your limits, right? Somebody's always come to save you, right? And he makes Shen Qiao say, yeah, yes, you're right. But then this paragraph here, I was like, Yang Wuxi, let's keep this in mind. I don't care about Shen Qiao. I'm just his rival. I just want to fight him. I don't care what happens to him. That Yang Wuxi says, no matter how powerful the Zhuyang strategy is, it can't create something out of nothing. There's no way you'll recover your martial arts in a couple of years with the state that you're in. Your foundations are damaged, fainting, you're vomiting blood at the drop of the hat. You might linger in this half-dead state for the rest of your life. First of all, Yang Wuxi knows that Shen Qiao is totally fine with that because he's freaking Jesus. And he's like, I'm glad you're fine with that, but I'm not fine with that. So there's that. He says, now that everyone has seen you appear at the Sioux residence with the junior preceptor's invitation, news of our relationship will spread quickly throughout the Jianghu. This part here, he says, my venerable self has enemies everywhere. They can't touch me, but you're an easy target. What do you think they'll do if they catch you? Will they torture you into writing out the Jianghu strategy? Or will they assault and kill you first and then assault your corpse some more out of spite? When that happens, can you still find this situation endurable? Now, while that seems like he is egging on and taunting at Shen Qiao and trying to like neg at him, what that also tells me is that Yang Wuxi is kind of scared of what could happen to Shen Qiao. Because Yang Wuxi is basically saying, Yang Wuxi is doing like the Lois Lane Clark Kent thing, where he's being Superman. He's like, I'm impervious, but you're but a mere mortal, and I have lots of enemies. They might target you to get to me, is what he's basically saying, even if he doesn't realize it. And then Shen Qiao gets mad, and he's like, well, we can talk about that when it actually happens. You don't have to trouble yourself before then. They're literally having like a married couple's like quarrel. Right in front of us. Right in front of our eyes. They're having this little married couple spat, and they're not even together. But Shen Qiao is like, why do we have to worry about this now? It's not happening. Why are you like making up these scenarios? And I'm like, because Yang Wuxi cares about you. And even if Yang Wuxi has not realized it yet, even if he doesn't want to admit it, he is thinking something bad might happen to you, and he doesn't want that to happen. And so he's trying to think of, what can we do to prevent you from suffering anymore? And so when Shen Qiao like slaps his hand away, Yang Wuxi is like, he's like, oh, I mean, yeah, I was only scaring you. Like, what, you got upset for such a little thing? Sir. And Shen Qiao's speechless. And then Ruru comes in with the bowl of medicine, and Shen Qiao takes it in one gulp. Because he's just like, honestly, the quarrel between them and Yang Wuxi kind of letting out a little bit of his inner feelings for Shen Qiao was my favorite part of this whole chapter set. I loved this. I loved this conversation. And so Shen Qiao admits that when he was a kid, he hated bitter medicine. He hated taking it. But also, he wanted to get better so that he wouldn't have to take the medicine. So he's like, everyone thought he was hardworking, when in truth, he was just trying to escape the bitter medicine. But here, no matter how many bowls of medicine were brought to him, he drank them all without objection. I think that that's an interesting reveal of Shen Qiao's character, that he reveals that people thought he was just like a good kid that was hardworking just for, like to do it for the right reasons. When Shen Qiao admits that he has a shortcoming, that he just didn't want the bitter medicine, that was his reasoning. It was a less than noble reason. So, a little chinks in the armor there, little cracks in the perfect porcelain. And then when he like scrunches his face, Yang Wuxi sees all of that, and he sees how much of a show that Shen Qiao's putting on. And this part here, where he's like, if you dislike bitter things, I'll ask them to put some barley sugar in your medicine. So smile, don't frown so much. And he gives him the candied preserve and shoves it into his mouth, being like, look. And, there is a part of that would come across as a little bit icky of it's like when guys are like, come on, you should smile more, and like stuff like that. There's stuff like that that's kind of icky. But in his case here, I don't think Shen Qiao realizes how sincere he is, but Yang Wuxi doesn't want him to suffer. And he's like, hey, if you don't like something, I'll make it to where you won't have to worry about that. And Shen Qiao just doesn't know what to do with this. And I don't blame Shen Qiao for not knowing what to do with this, because Yang Wuxi doesn't even know what he's doing. Yang Wuxi does not realize that he is falling for Shen Qiao. He has not realized it yet. He still thinks that they're just playing a game and they're just going to be rivals. And I'm like, sir, you are falling head over heels and you don't even know. You don't even know. But, such a good chapter set. This last part of chapter 35, more of this. I want lover spats between the two of them. I love it. I want more of it. I need more of it. I'm hoping that we get more of it. So anyway, we are off to a great start with old Volume 2, and I'm super excited to see what we get next week. So I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I am so curious to hear your thoughts down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I hope you all come back soon, and I will be back with chapters, we're doing 36, 37, and 38, but there's a good chunk there, so we'll be looking at those 3 chapters next week with Thousand Autumns, and I'll see you there. Bye.